Star Network is.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
It's Thursday, May 4th, 2023. My name is Reese Colbert. I will be filling in today while Roland is on location at the 35th National Equal Justice Awards dinner in New York City. Roland will be joining us throughout the show. Here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. We begin with a significant development out of Texas, where the GOP-controlled Senate has proposed a controversial new law allowing the state to overturn elections. This has sparked concerns about the future of democracy in the state, and we'll have all the details in this fast-moving story. Former Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum has been acquitted of lying to the FBI. However, the jury has deadlocked on all other charges against him and co-defendant Sharon Lettman-Hicks. We will break down what this could mean for the former mayor. Tensions are rising in Florida, where 14 protesters were arrested outside Governor Ron DeSantis' office. The protesters were demonstrating against new conservative laws in the state, highlighting the growing divide between activists and the governor's administration. We will speak with the DreamDefenders about their fight to make Florida safe and fair for all. ProPublica's bombshell report alleging deeper financial ties between Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and Republican donor Harlan Crow than previously known. This raises serious questions about the court's impartiality, and we'll have all the latest details. In New York, calls are growing for justice and accountability after the death of a Black man who was placed in a chokehold by a fellow white subway passenger. The urgency for action is mounting, and we'll update you on the latest developments. Black Star Network has a brand new show joining the lineup. We'll tell you all about it and much more. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, Rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
A Florida jury acquits former Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum of lying to the FBI about accepting gifts from undercover agents. The jury deadlocked on the more severe charges of conspiracy and wire fraud against Gillum and his co-defendant Sharon Lettman-Hicks, related to the misuse of campaign funds. The 12-person jury could not reach a verdict on 1 count of conspiracy and 17 counts of wire fraud against both defendants. U.S. District Judge Alan Windsor declared a mistrial on the counts that ended with no verdict reached. Assistant U.S. Attorney Gary Milligan II said the government would retry Gillum and Lettman-Hicks on the conspiracy and wire fraud charges. I want to bring in our panel for this evening. We are joined by the wonderful Lauren Victoria Burke of Black Press USA, the esteemed Dr. Nola Haynes, PhD, Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, and Dr. Cleo Mango, social architect and chief advisor of the Black Men's Exchange. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's show. I want to start off with you, Dr. I'm sorry, did I say your name right? Manago?
That time you were right, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. It's our first time together, so bear with me. Please correct me. I want to start off with you and your reaction to the mixed messages, mixed verdict, but overall probably a win more than anything for Andrew Gillum. What's your reaction?
Well, my reaction is relief. As far as I'm concerned, it was a witch hunt. It was petty anyway. And it's been more revenge politics, getting back at the man for having such a strong presence when he ran for the governor of Florida. And they've been after him ever since because he had the nerves to almost win and potentially turn on its head the white supremacist control of that state, which has been the case for many, many years. And I think they want to teach him a lesson, and they wanted to embarrass him, humiliate him, and destroy him to the nth degree. And I'm relieved that him and my friend Sharon Lettman-Hicks has been found basically exonerated for this situation. I expect the whole thing to go away at some point because it was petty in the first place. So I feel good about it, and I am relieved.
So even though the attorney has said they will retry, your prediction is that they will cut their losses and move on?
Well, they're desperate. I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
I am just relieved that it turned out the way it did at this point. But they're desperate. They like to make a point. They like to make statements. They like to make people fearful of stepping up, as Gillum did. And I don't know what they're going to do. I would imagine, given how cutthroat they are, they're going to attempt to make this happen again. But I don't think they're going to be successful.
Right. Now, Dr. Haynes, I know you are sensitive about weighing in and more political ways, but one thing I found was interesting was that Gillum was raising money for his legal defense fund. You know, it's interesting that he had so much trouble kind of raising money, where we've seen other kind of white-collar crimes and people of that nature who are up for similar charges not have any problems. Do you think, in terms of kind of the challenges that he had with raising funds, bear it at all in the kind of justice he was able to get here today?
You know, when it comes to Mr. Gillum, you know, first of all, for the man to still be able to stand up and continue to fight, I mean, you have to give him credit for that. He has definitely been through the ringer. And as a Southerner myself, you know, it just breaks my heart to see what's happening in places like Florida and Texas. And I agree with the comment with the doctor said just before me, that a lot of this feels like revenge politics. Yeah. So in terms of the particulars of his case and the kind of political landscape, you're right. You know, I won't comment too much on that. But what I will say is what I have been noticing is what we need to move away from when we're thinking about things like this is framing this in terms of like culture war, you know, sorts of things. I've been talking a lot about this. These types of revenge politics, like this goes beyond any sort of culture war, right? This is something else. This is something different, and we are wading in very dangerous territory. And I just want to say, you know, like props to him. He keeps standing up and fighting for himself, and we all know he has truly been through it. And I just wish him I wish him well on the other side of it. That's really my thoughts and feelings about it. Right. I mean, I think you make a good point. We do tend to sometimes talk about these things in terms of the culture wars, but this was a man who was a father of two, a husband, and this has completely shaken up his life to the point to where he's no longer on CNN, and some of his opportunities have closed as a result of this prosecution. Lauren, what's your take on the results that we saw today? Also, keeping in mind that Trump is up for similar charges, obviously at the state level, but wire fraud is one of those, you know, kind of charges that usually are pretty easy to get a conviction on.
Yeah, you know, I echo what Cleo Manago said. You know, this idea that it just feels, I think our spidey sense is tingling when you see that Andrew Gillum, of course, almost beat Ron DeSantis to be governor of Florida. And then shortly after that, of course, we get this trial with all of these counts, and you get the big announcement. And, you know, he was led into court in waist chains and ankle bracelets and all the drama and nonsense and everything else. And it turns out to be a big nothing. You have a 17-count 17 counts of everybody reading everything. It kind of reminds me of the Brian Benjamin situation in New York with the lieutenant governor. And, big announcement, big press conference, and then a big nothing. I mean, literally everything was kicked out of court. And so I have a hard time believing that any of this would be happening had he not come very close to winning statewide in Florida, which has been something that has been incredibly difficult for the Democrats to do. And he, of course, almost did that for governor. So in what would have been, of course, a historic moment in terms of him being the first Black governor of Florida. So it's just, a situation where it doesn't feel like something of coincidence. It was a book that came out some years ago from a professor at University of Maryland named Derek Musgrove on this very topic, which was Black elected officials being, investigated on ethics matters. What an amazing coincidence.
Yeah.
It just feels what it feels. And as for Donald Trump, it is amazing to me the difference in reaction to what is going on with him with regard to the E. Jean Carroll case. He is on trial for rape, and then CNN decides to platform him. They're going to platform him next week, which I find quite interesting. It's just, that doesn't matter to anybody that this guy is being accused. Now, of course, he has not been convicted yet, but still, to listen to the evidence in the courtroom is quite interesting. And however the outcome, good for E. Jean Carroll for playing it out and going all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think that we've seen, as you pointed out, the drastic difference in the theater behind it, obviously going out of their way to humiliate Mayor Gillum with the chains. It's really appalling. And they seem to always find the time and the unlimited resources to investigate Black lawmakers, even costing, as you pointed out, former Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin his job, and it was a big nothing burger. So we'll continue to keep an eye on this story and hope for the best for the Gillum family. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Up next on The Frequency with me, Dee Barnes, our special guest, Alicia Garza, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to discuss her new book, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart.
We live in a world where we have to navigate, when we say something, people look at us funny, but when a man says the same thing less skillfully than we did, right? Right. Everybody flocks towards what they said, even though it was your idea.
Right here on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
Kevin Hart telling me that. He's like, man, what you doing, man? You got to stay on stage. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm young, thinking, I'm good. And he was absolutely right.
What show did you have at that?
This was one-on-one.
Got it.
During that time.
So you're doing one-on-one, going great, you making money, you like...
I'm like, I don't need to leave. I don't need to leave from, Wednesday, Thursday to Sunday. I didn't want to do that. It was just like, I'm gonna stay here. Or I didn't want to finish work Friday, fly out, go do a gig Saturday, Sunday. I was like, I don't have to do that. And I lost a little bit of that hunger that I had in New York. I would hit all the clubs, run around. Sometimes me and Chappelle or me and this one or that one, we'd go to the Comedy Cellar at 1 in the morning. And that was our life. We loved it. You do 2 shows in Manhattan, go to Brooklyn, leave Brooklyn, go to Queens, go to Jersey. And I got complacent. I was like, I got this money, I'm good. I don't need to go chase that, because that money wasn't at the same level that I was making, but what I was missing was that training.
Yes.
Was that.
And it wasn't the money.
It was the money. It was that's what I needed.
Black TV does matter, dang it.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy, Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now. Yee.
The Texas legislature advances a bill allowing the Secretary of State to redo elections in Harris County. Harris County is where several Democratic candidates posted strong midterm results and have been plagued by GOP claims of election mismanagement. The Republican-controlled Senate passed the bill Tuesday. It's now going before the House. If enacted, it would allow the Secretary of State to toss out election results in the state's largest county and call a new vote if there is a quote-unquote good cause. To believe that at least 2% of polling places ran out of usable ballots during voting hours. Joining me now is Texas State Representative Jarvis Johnson. Representative Johnson, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Can you just talk a little bit about how this bill is laser targeting Harris County and only Harris County, as opposed to being something about election integrity across the entire state?
Well, we've watched the entire session, even last session when Republicans passed bills that are targeted and aimed at Democratic cities and Democratic counties. We watched it last session with the whole defund the police, where they created a bill that was specifically for counties over 2 million people. That's only a couple of counties. That's Harris County in Houston and in Dallas. Then to this year, we're looking at a bill that is simply bracketed for 2.7 million people. That's only Harris County. Now, why are they doing that? Because Harris County is a blue county. We have elected all Democratic judges. We have a county judge that is a Democrat. We have the overwhelming majority of the county courts, the county commissioners are Democrats. And so they're going to target and bracket all of these bills to simply overturn elections that they don't agree with. And that's the most undemocratic thing that can happen in this country, not alone this state, but this country. And everybody should be fearful, because you have people like Governor Abbott and the Republican Party that have chosen to undo the law and simply make unconstitutional laws that simply give them authority to overturn elections that they simply don't agree with. And they're going to make up rules. They're going to make up stories. They're going to, there was no ballots or they ran out of ballots. And when you look at the amount in Harris County, you can vote at any voting poll that is available. So it's not just you ran out of ballots at this poll, so you don't have no choice of voting. You could go to any poll in the county. So this notion is one that I think is it's unconstitutional, and it's a very egregious law that I think is going to be very harmful, not only to Harris County, but you'll start to see consequently in any county where Democrats are the majority.
Right. Now, how do you, as Democrats, deal with the messaging behind this? Because on its face, admittedly, it doesn't sound terribly unreasonable, at least that there's a requirement to have paper ballots at every polling place. But obviously, the fact that the Secretary of State can then overturn the election is extreme. So how do you really underscore how extreme it is to overturn and order new elections?
Number one, you got to call it out what it is. You will see that there will be election judges that I think will do some very unlawful things. I think that you have Republican election judges in some of these cities that will purposely sabotage for the very reason of this particular bill, to say that, we ran out of ballots, or we ran out of paper, or the line was too long. Nobody had a problem when lines in the Black community were wrapped around the block couldn't vote for 6 hours because that was the only poll that you can go to. That was not a problem. And when the polls closed at 7 o'clock and you still had people waiting until 3 o'clock in the morning to vote, that's not a problem. But when the elections start to be changed, that's the problem. And so the messaging is very simple. They are going to say that this is wrong, and we want to protect all voters. And they're not trying to protect all voters. They're simply trying to make sure that only their votes matter, and only their votes are cast and counted. That's why they have put forth so many bills that incriminates, prosecutes, and the fear of jail time for people who simply make a mistake. There's a bill that was put forth that it creates a felony if someone votes wrong, a felony for a mistake. Mm-hmm. And so that in itself is what I think we're having. And so you're going to find a lot of people that, look, I want to vote, but I don't want to get in trouble. And so the ambiguity, that type of, and that threat is what I think put fear in people's hearts. And I think that's the mission of the Republican Party. And so the messaging is we have to fight back against that. And we have to clearly make sure that people understand that we're not going to just sit by and allow these type of bills to be put forward, because they are very, very targeted. And this is a targeted campaign that they have to overturn elections. This is not a democratic process. This is not an American process. This is done so by what is now becoming the king of Texas, and what we have a government, and making these decisions to say, if it doesn't work for me, then I'm going to change it, and I don't need anybody to stop me. And right now we're almost there. And unfortunately, his own party is allowing him to do these things without any consequence, because they simply think that nobody outside of Harris County should vote for this, because the bill says 2.7. So why should somebody in rural Texas vote on this bill? Because it's only bracketed for Harris County.
Right.
So, but when we're here in Texas and we're in this country, we vote and we make laws that apply to everybody. Everyone should. This is a law that goes across the board. So to the governor and to all those Republicans that want to bracket this, let's make sure it's for everybody. Let's make sure that this rule accounts for the small towns that ran out of paper ballots. Let's account for the any of these areas, because it happens over and over and over again. The number of ballots that were not cast or they didn't have paper was for 40 people out of 1.1 million. Right. And they made this big deal. Oh my God, we couldn't vote. Could you have gone down the street? Could you have gone to the next polling place, which is only, a couple of blocks away? Absolutely. I've done it myself. Lines have been long. I've gone around the corner. You can still count the ballot. So I push all the time. All bills and all laws should be equal and across the board. But I will say this. When we make laws in this state, I always say laws apply to everybody, but they're only applicable to some. And we know who this bill is targeting. They've lost the judges. They've elected 16 black women judges in Harris County.
Right.
And that has blown people's minds, and they're going, we can't let that happen again. And so we're going to overturn it, because something had to happen as to why these Democrats are winning.
Yeah.
So they're trying to take away our ability to elect democratically elected leaders.
Well, I have a question too about just, has there been a different reaction from the citizens of Harris County to this? We've seen Republicans successfully go after absentee ballots, making it more difficult to vote that way, as well as, all of the advances that Harris County made in 2020. There's still time, I would think, to kind of get people really galvanized around this. Have you seen a different reaction to this specific bill than you have in other voter suppression bills that have been proposed?
Well, I think but that's the issue. Harris County is absolutely 100% in opposition to this bill. We're opposed to this bill across the board. Right. We're all opposed to this bill.
Yeah.
But that's the point. They understand that they can't beat Harris County, so they need the rest of the state.
Right.
To overtake Harris County. So that's why they go get, Collin County. That's why they go get Tarrant County. That's why they go get all of these other, maybe Republican-led counties to say, hey, we need you to help us vote against Harris County. So we have 14 members from Harris County out of the 150. And yet you're going to go and get the other 100 and help me with my math, 126 people
yeah.
to make a decision for the 14. And I think that's the problem. They understand Harris County is against this.
Yes.
Leaving it up to us, we're not going to support you to come only audit us. We're not going to let you say, we're going to only audit you.
Right.
Because it happened when we were talking about ballots, where they had a bill last session that simply said, hey, we're going to redo all Harris County elections. And I asked all of my Republican colleagues, do you believe that you won your election? Well, yeah, I won my election. So if you won your election, why do you think that Harris County didn't elect fairly? Well, it's all because Donald Trump lost. And so that was the whole, so this is where all this balloting thing comes from. And this is certainly what the problem continues to be when they want to try to overtake Harris County. But we're trying to stand tall and stand strong. But they're bringing all the resources from all over the state to make decisions simply for Harris County, which is un-American and certainly unjustifiable and unconstitutional.
Right.
And I think that's a horrible precedent, and we're going to be, and if we allow something like this to happen, I think Republicans and Democrats have to start to look and understand that you have a governor that will pick and choose when and who he decides to go after, who he wants to be the next election. So these elections are not fair. They're not going to be, you're not going to be elected by the people.
Right. It certainly feels like an opening salvo to just flat out disregarding election results and hoping nobody notices. We do have enough time to maybe get one or two questions from the panel in. So, Lauren, I'll start with you. Do you have a question for Representative Johnson?
Yeah, Reese, it goes back to what you were asking. What is the messaging? How do you respond to this? You're effectively dealing with a Republican Party that, I think it's an open question about whether or not the Republican Party believes in democracy. And so how do you deal with that?
Well, they're undemocratic mindset. They tell the lie enough and over again, they'll start to believe it. And they think that this is an American, this is certainly, we're trying to make sure things are fair and due process is followed. No, it's not. It's you're literally trying to overturn an election that was fair, transparent, and open. But the messaging for us on the Democratic side is we have to stand tall and stand strong. But we have to send a message that this is not going to be just Harris County. The people in this county are not going to go away, and certainly the mindsets will not go away. And what we're going to find is that you're going to have a minority of people running the majority of this state. And so we understand this is a power grab. This is all it is. The white Republican, my white Republican counterparts are simply saying, hey, we're losing our base. What can we do? Well, let's start snatching seats. Let's start telling everybody that everybody else is cheating except for us. We're the only ones not cheating. So, but we're not going to look. And I think it goes back to the story you just said about the candidate from Florida. We're only going to look at Democratic counties. We're only going to look at black districts because why? We're not going to look at our own. We're not going to look to see where the cheating was on our side. We're only going to look at you. And that's certainly what they're trying to do, the messaging. So people have to understand it's not if, it's when they're going to come after you next. And so, but we're standing tall and strong. And I have to even tell my colleagues that are Republicans in Harris County that you have a body of people that elected you, duly elected you. And if you're saying that there has been a problem with the election, then you're saying that you were not elected fairly. And so I'm going to ask, and I certainly will put up an amendment that asks that anybody who votes for this will have to resign their seat because they're saying themselves that they were not duly elected, that something, something happened or there was some illegality, something that was illegal that allowed them to win. So if they vote for this bill, then they understand that they are complicit and they're saying to the rest of us that they cheated to get here.
Well, Representative Johnson, thank you so much. Keep up the good fight and keep us posted on how this story unfolds in Texas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys keep up the good work, keeping everybody informed and educated.
Thank you. We'll be right back with more Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hi, this is Essence Atkins.
Hey, I'm Deion Cole from Blackish.
Hey everybody, this is your man Fred Hammond, and you're watching Roland Martin, my man, Unfiltered.
All right, I want to get the panel back in on this story that we just talked about with Representative Jarvis Johnson. Dr. Monago, I'm going to go to you first since I didn't get you to ask a question. What's your reaction to the blatant power grab from the Republicans in Texas?
What I wanted to ask the representative is, he says they're standing tall and strong. And I'm wondering if that's the people that are his colleagues or the Harris County is standing tall and strong. And if they're being passive in the presence of this or becoming catatonic and complacent, or what they're actually doing. I believe that individually, he and many of his colleagues probably are standing up hard against us, but I'm wondering how the community is responding, because I think that there's a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety among Black folks in the midst of this backlash of white supremacy trying to keep itself in place. And I'm just concerned that we are talking to the community and getting them involved.
Right.
Because some of these political people are in ivory towers and they get upset, but they don't actually go into the community, or the community sometimes doesn't even know who they are until they're upset. And I'm wondering about that. And I'm also wondering if the people understand that this white supremacist war is kind of predictable.
Yeah.
I want to ask the representative, are you surprised? Mm-hmm. And if you're surprised, are you doing something to prepare for the next assault? Because it's coming.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm just wondering what people are going to do, because I get tired of just the rhetoric around we don't like it. What is the strategy?
Yeah.
To resist and prevent something that's going to come, that's going to happen. I mean, it was appropriate to reference Gillum while he was speaking, because what we've seen him go through, the humiliation, is part of the attack.
Right.
But often it appears to me that people look at it as a sneak attack, or they're surprised over and over again, which means they don't prepare well when it's going to come again.
Right.
That concerns me.
Right. Dr. Haynes, I know that you are so knowledgeable about foreign policy and democracies across the world. Do you see similarities between what's happening in Texas and some of the things that we claim we're trying to help restore democracy or fight against assaults on democracy around the country, around the world?
Absolutely, and thank you for asking me a question that way, because that's how I want to address it. What we're seeing is nationalism, point blank, period. And right now, when we're thinking about democracy, and I'm not an alarmist type of person, I like to think through things. I like to, employ logic where I can. But I cannot stress this enough. Right now, where we are in terms of, if we had a democracy doomsday clock, I would say, the way that it's set right now for a potential nuclear strike, which is 90 minutes to midnight, it's pretty clear that we're pretty close to that. Like, democracy literally is on the line. And usually what happens is, when you can, things to look out for when democracies are teetering on the edge are things like when laws are manipulated to suit one particular group, right? When laws are being manipulated and other people are being punished through the law. So the manipulation of law and policy, something that means the world to me, is one of the largest growing threats in this country. And it's annexed to nationalism. The types of bias-led policies that we're seeing is rooted in a white supremacist ideal that how dare the uppity Negro, tries to advance in any sort of way. And if you do, you will be punished and humiliated like Gillum. I mean, and we're seeing evidence of this time and time again. And another reason why I'm worried is because we have something called stare decisis in our country. We have legal precedent. And what's happening all over the South. And being from one of the blacker places in Louisiana, this is definitely something that I'm worried about, because what if, they try to use this tactic because it worked in Texas, the things that's happening in Florida. So this has larger implications. And when we start to see bias show up in policies and laws, we are absolutely in trouble. And again, it does go beyond messaging. I was going to ask the representative about what's the counterpunch here? What is the strategy? What, beyond, saying, we're going to stand up and maybe alter the messaging, what they are doing is co-opting civil rights messages. What they are doing are co-opting civil rights packages. And I want to know, what are you going to do to counter that? Because like the doctor just said, more attacks are coming. And it's going to be in the form of more policies and laws. Then what?
Absolutely. I mean, all of this is connected, right? We saw them expel members that are duly elected in Tennessee. We see them going after student IDs in, for instance, Wisconsin and around the country. We see in Texas now they are trying to essentially give themselves to overturn the elections in one county. It all goes back to what we saw in 2020, where the Trump administration or the Trump legal campaign team attacked voters in Philadelphia, attacked voters in Milwaukee. And so all of these things are happening in plain view, and who the hell is going to do anything about it? Lauren, I want to get you back in on this again, because the reality is this is another escalation in what we're seeing from the Republicans, and we can't out-organize, we can't get Cliff Albright and Stacey Abrams and LaTosha Brown down there and work miracles when the judges can flat out overturn elections. Oh, I think you're muted, Lauren.
Sorry, everybody.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry about that. They're moving extrajudicially without any regard to the way a democracy works. And they're increasing this as they figure out that they're outnumbered. The fact of the matter is that, their tiki god, Donald Trump, lost to Hillary Clinton by 3 million votes and then lost to Joe Biden by 8 million votes. And they know that, aware of that. So what's scary here is that I don't see a real strategy. In fact, you can't really win a war on different rules. You can't, be playing by the rules and the other side is not playing by the rules. This started, I thought, sort of with the Newt Gingrich era in Congress. And then when President Obama was elected, you saw a clear attempt by the Tea Party to sort of, just basically resist everything that President Obama was doing, obviously. And I think there was a realization within the Republican Party that, we're getting outnumbered, the demographics are changing, and we are not even going to pretend, as Dr. Carr likes to say, they dropped all pretense.
Yeah.
They are not even trying to pretend that they are trying to play by the rules of democracy. They are going for the jugular. And the question is, what is the other side going to do about it? When you start seeing people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan show up, and then Jim Jordan trying to negate a duly elected prosecutor in New York, to negate his actions and haul him in before Congress and all these antics, they're serious. You saw obviously President Trump trying to negate the election against that he lost by 8 million votes to Joe Biden. He tried to negate that, and there was an attack on the U.S. Capitol. This is always all happening, by the way, while we have a media that is increasingly weak, increasingly sort of not up to the task and not up to the challenge. And so it is an extremely dangerous moment. And we all realize what it is. Everybody sees what it is. Everybody knows what it is. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And we haven't gotten to the point where that question has been answered of what are we going to do about it?
Well, we have to
respond again.
Oh, okay. Quickly, before we have to go to a break. Yes, please.
This is going back to Gillum and kind of doing a contrast between Donald Trump and Gillum.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Donald Trump was indicted, etc., the black male image and the black human image in this society has stigma and is sustained.
Yes.
An attack and sabotage lasts longer in blackface than it does in whiteface.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we knew what a horrendous human being Donald Trump was before he became president. He became president anyway. My concern is that these attacks on black people demoralize black people into paralyzation. And that's why it's important to have conversations like all three of us have said is, what you gonna do?
Right.
You know, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do to keep Black people from sinking into paralysis and complacency while the war, which has been blatant, is coming? I didn't have a problem with when the representative used terms like "this is not American." I don't know what that means, because that kind of behavior has been American all of my life. And some people consider me an old man. I don't necessarily agree, but that's what some people say about me. And it's like, this is American.
Yeah. Oh, it's as American as apple pie.
Yeah, and apple pie, and there's police brutality and the murder of Black people in the hands of cops. This is American. So what are we going to do other than being emotionally upset about something? Emotions don't stop a war. Strategies and tactics, and engaging the community and the population and waking them up from complacency and letting them see what's going on, not the approach that the Congress and the Democratic Party keeps taking, which is an eggshell, let's not offend anybody, let's act like there's not a problem that bad going on. The Republicans are being direct, straight up, and present with their agenda, and the Democratic Party in Congress is still sneaking around, allegedly not trying to offend anyone and being raked over the coals, even when they have local elections. Because when they win the local elections, as has occurred in the state of Texas, white people step up their game, and then we get demoralized, and this can be reversed.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that this whole follow duty, follow process doesn't work when one team is cheating and then the other team, meaning a lot of voters, disaffected voters, disillusioned voters, apathetic voters, aren't even in the ballgame at all. Pretty soon, us begging and pleading for you to vote isn't even going to be an option because you're not even going to be able to vote. So as long as you have the right, you should be exercising that right and exercising that capacity, because they're not trying to take it away for nothing. But we got to head to a break. We'll be right back with more Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind $100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
My name is Charlie Wilson.
Hi, I'm Sally Richardson Whitfield.
And I'm Dondre Whitfield.
Hey everybody, this is your man Fred Hammond, and you're watching Roland Martin, my man, Unfiltered.
In Florida, 14 DreamDefenders and allied organization members were taken away in handcuffs for refusing to leave the governor's office. The DreamDefenders sit-in was part of a national protest called Freedom to Learn. The protesters wanted to shed light on many issues facing Floridians and called for a meeting with DeSantis to share the legislative session's impact on communities. Joining me now are two of the organizers of the protest, Ashley Green and Malik Reddy. Welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, thank you all so much for having us.
And Malik, it looks like you are graduation ready. Congratulations. What are you, before we get into the story, what are you graduating with? What's your degree in?
My Associate of Arts in Political Science.
That's awesome. All right. So talk a little bit, I'll let you start off, about exactly what this protest was and what you were trying to bring attention to for Malik.
Yeah, I think we were, and we had some goals, and those goals were to bring attention to the fascist governor that we have in the state of Florida with the bad bills like abortion bills, education bills, and the immigration bill that was just passed. And we did that as part of our Can't Ban Us campaign. And so we have to continue to show that Florida is the place that he's going to use to try to puppet some things through. And we got to make sure that we stop him now so that he does not get in the White House. And this is just the beginning. There's more to come from us in the Dream Defenders.
Ashley, I know that the word or the phrase Dream Defenders has a very specific meaning. Can you talk about what that means for the audience?
Yes, we came into existence after the murder of Trayvon Martin, obviously, and I think we're a part of a renewed arc fighting for justice across this country that was really being informed by a lot of civil rights elders and a lot of Black Power elders, and so really embodied sort of that spirit in the name Dream Defenders. But over the years, I think it became really a lot more critical just to think about what is the dream worth defending for our youth and our communities, and making sure that there is a dream for ourselves, for our peers, and for the people who are now, 10 years later, a generation under us who are still fighting for freedom and still fighting for justice in their neighborhoods and in their communities. And so for us, Dream Defenders is really a rallying cry that, like, not only are we fighting for a dream, but that we deserve to have a dream to fight for in the first place. Absolutely. And we see Ron DeSantis getting legislative win after win after win. Your organization, the kinds of protests that you all are responsible for organizing, are going to be critically important in highlighting the fascist that he is when he inevitably launches his national campaign. Do you have any reaction to the ways that the legislature right now is moving to make it easier for Ron DeSantis to run for president and maintain his position as governor of Florida? I mean, it's a classic story in Florida that they change the rules in order to fit them and benefit them. Ron DeSantis is no different than a Rick Scott, than a Jeb Bush, who has been consistently focused on gaining more and more power and rigging the game in their favor. I think someone previously said you can't win a war when the rules are played, when there are a different set of rules. And Florida is really ground zero for that. There should be no reason why Ron DeSantis is both trying to govern the state of Florida and run for governor based on a more than 20-year policy across the state. And yet he changed the rules so he could do it. And when you look at the two Black district seats that we lost last year, it's through gerrymandering that was specifically to make sure that Black people were denied a voice in Congress, even though the state of Florida gained 2 more congressional seats through the census process. Mm-hmm. And so this is just a continued arc of rigging the game against Black citizens in Florida, but really rigging the game for their pursuit of petty political power. And it's unacceptable, and we're going to keep fighting back against it. Yeah, Malik Ashley talked about how Florida is kind of like ground zero for so many things that are happening. It's hard to keep up with it all because DeSantis is on a roll. What's something other than, like, for instance, the attention-grabbing Reedy Creek battle that's going on? What's something that really is flying under the radar in Florida that people should be paying attention to that you all are trying to shed light on?
Yeah, our priority bill, this legislation, was HB 99, which we call the Mega University Bill, which had parts of diversity, inclusion, and equity that have been taken away from our universities, especially our D9s were on the chopping block. They are getting gender studies in the schools that offer it, and they're also reducing the budget that was given to these programs in our DEI. And that is important, especially we have so many HBCUs here in the state of Florida. And actually, Florida has one of the highest of debtors in the nation. And so as we continue to see these things being rolled back, we got to pay attention. You're definitely correct. And then for me, that is that HB 99 bill. Especially, I'm about to go to FAM in the fall that's coming up, and I would still, I would love to go there. I would be a third generation rattler. So, that is a bill that is striking home for me. Okay, sounds good. I definitely have seen that they were successful in getting that passed, and I'm not sure if he signed it yet or if it's going to his desk, but that is something that people warned about that kind of just
flew under the radar a little bit. I'm going to go to the panel and give them an opportunity to ask you all questions. I'm going to start off with you, Dr. Haynes.
Thank you both for the work that you're doing. I have so many questions. As a political scientist, congratulations, Malik. I am incredibly proud of you. I hope you stick with it. There are rewards down the way. And, you know, I went to UCLA for undergrad, and there are many intersections here in terms of, I remember when DACA was passed. I worked for DEIA programs for many, many years. There just cross-cuts across a lot of things that I personally care about. So my question will be very similar to something I was thinking about with the representative from Texas earlier. I love the fact that sit-ins are happening and that there are actual things that are being done on the ground. But in terms of fighting back, say through the legal system or in other ways, what are some of the strategies, if you can talk about them, that you all are doing along with these kind of very strong and symbolic gestures like this sit-in?
Yeah, I can start. Florida is a state that I said earlier has been working to rig itself against us for over a generation. And there's a supermajority, not just in the legislature and in the executive branch, but they have rigged the courts in ways that has made a lot of these policies difficult to fight back against. And so we've been consistently filing suit with partners like the SPLC against bills like HB1, which really limited protest rights. We'll be doing the same around some of these immigration policies, around some of the education policies. But the way that Florida has been set up over this last generation has made it difficult to know what avenues and routes we have beyond taking civil disobedience and direct action in order to fight for, justice in our communities. Even when we get things done at the community level, the state regularly preempts local policies and makes those policies inadmissible or impossible to implement. So when we get wage theft ordinances passed, when we get minimum wage policies passed, when we get protective policies passed, the state will come in and actually limit the ability of a municipality to do that. And we'll, can file suit after suit after suit, but we're in a project of trying to build long-term political power here because it is the only solution that we have in a state like Florida that keeps exporting its bad policies across the country.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, that these policies are going national. I mean, all of the Republican Party nationally is trading one bad idea for the other, and they keep escalating with these oppressive and fascist policies. So people can't just ignore what's happening in one state or another because it's probably coming to a town or a state near you. I'm going to go to Dr. Manago.
Yeah, you said these ideas are bad. Now, I personally agree that they're bad, but it's relative and subjective depending on your agenda. To some people, what's going on is good. So I want to say that because I believe in looking at contrasting perspectives, even if I disagree with them, that they're indeed based on what people think is good for them. And white supremacist control freaks in this country who want to sustain power believe everything they're doing is in the good, it's right, it's justified in terms of what they think should happen in this world. But I have two questions. One is, earlier it was referenced that Florida was ground zero for so many basically problematic things. I was wondering if Biden's cabinet or Biden has addressed Florida and all that it's dealing with to kind of use his position to throw a wrench in the injustice norms that are occurring there. That's one question. The second question is, and it's similar to what I asked the representative earlier, is the community involved as a collective against resisting this white supremacist scorched earth approach to power in Florida? Is it still, or is it small groups of people, or has the community become alarmed? And for example, when they attack Gillum, this is a Florida phenomenon, is the community looking at all of this from a collective perspective, or is it mostly the traditional activist types who are in the streets? I hope you remember my first question about Biden.
Well, have you answer that, Malik?
I feel like we do a good job of not just having the activists in the street. That's why we're here, right? We're trying to build that door power and people power, and that is getting the folks that aren't necessarily educated about the things that's going on. And I know I haven't got to your first question. I'm going to actually give that question to AG. But I do think that we are doing a great job of trying to get those that are not necessarily knowing what is going on. It's actually funny you said, that should be the governor of the state right now, Andrew Gillum, and he just got a non-guilty verdict today. So right now we have to take that information to the streets. And so I think we do a good job of that in Dream Defenders. That is our ultimate goal. And I'll toss it over to AG.
Yeah, obviously, we are first and foremost invested in building power amongst people and community, not amongst other activists or people in echo chamber. I will say that the right, again, has had a generational agenda of building political power of their own. And so when we talk about these voucher programs and dismantling of public education, when we're talking about these immigration policies, people have been told to turn against one another and turn against a collective interest. And so we have to do that education work in community. I think in terms of Biden, whether or not he has been proactive enough as a president in Florida, I think is definitely up for debate. We have seen different parts of the administration be supportive and fighting back and offering support around combating some of these policies. But we definitely think that the federal government has a larger responsibility to intervene in what's really some unconstitutional policies that are being forwarded. And I think the way that this legislature has been so aggressive in just rubber stamping any outrageous policy that the DeSantis sort of administration is forwarding has definitely given a lot of space, I think, to see DOJ intervention. And so we're hoping that we actually can see, more aggressive action taken by the Biden administration as these policies start to take effect.
Right. And of course, I have to add that Vice President Kamala Harris was in Florida within a month or so ago, taking it to DeSantis on the specific issue of reproductive rights. Lauren, you get the last question for this segment.
I'm wondering from the two of you, have you seen any improvement with the Florida party since, of course, they lost big, as I'm sure you know, last November? Do you see any improvement in the local wing of the party, or is it just starting to rebuild? How's that going?
I'm going to be honest with you. The state of Florida is 6 different states, and so Malik might have a different answer than I do. I think in Central Florida, where I'm at, the party is in a real rebuilding process. I'm sort of in the I-4 corridor part of the state. I think when we're talking about South Florida and just sort of the collapse, especially amongst Latino voters on behalf of the party, there's a long project ahead. And I think when you're looking at North Florida, Malik can speak to that more, but probably are a little bit more developed in terms of building and rebuilding a strategy to win. Obviously, we just had redistricting happen last year, and so the map has been reset, and the pathway to power looks a lot different, but it's going to be a long road, and one that we're committed to really being focused on over the next decade.
Thanks.
Yeah, Ashley, I think it's so important that you talked about that commitment and the fact that it's a long road, because so often we kind of score wins in terms of our agendas in terms of every 2 years, and the reality is that Republicans play long game. They cheat when they have to. They bend the rules. And yet, as Democratic voters, so often we're looking for a win yesterday. So activists and organizers like you are so critical in keeping us focused on the fact that we have to stay engaged in between elections, irrespective of what the legislative map looks like and what kind of wins the other side is racking up. So thank you so much for your dedication. Florida is very lucky to have you.
Thank you all so much for having us. And beyond the party, we know we still have to be in a project of building political power by any means necessary.
Absolutely. It's not just about Democratic or Republican. It's about Black political power in particular. Before you go, how can folks follow the work that you're doing with the Dream Defenders?
DreamDefenders.org is our website. At DreamDefenders is where you can find us on Twitter, same on Instagram. We're across multiple social media platforms. We're on TikTok. And so type Dream Defenders into your search engine and it's going to pull up ways to get involved. But that primary website is DreamDefenders.org. And we are ready not just to take on the fight in the state of Florida, but actually expanding nationally. And so coming to a city near you very soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Ashley. We'll be right back with more Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, nurses are the backbone of the healthcare industry, and yet only 7% of them are Black. What's the reason for that low number? Well, a lack of opportunities and growth in their profession. Joining us on the next Get Wealthy is Needy Bartonelli. She's going to be sharing exactly what nurses need to do and what approach they need to take ownership of their success.
So the Black Nurse Collaborative really spawned from a place and a desire to create opportunities to uplift each other, those of us in the profession, to also look and reach back and create pipelines and opportunities for other nurses like us.
That's right here on Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network.
On a next, A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie. What does it mean to actually have balance in your life? Why is it important and how do you get there? A masterclass on the art of balance. It could change your life.
Find the harmony of your life. And so what beat can you maintain at a good pace? What cadence can keep you running that marathon? Because we know we're going to have, high levels, we're going to have low levels, but where can you find that flow, that harmonious pace?
That's all next on A Balanced Life on Black Star Network.
Hello, everyone. It's Kiara Sheard.
Hey, I'm Taj.
I'm Coco.
And I'm Lily. And we're SWB.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
We're going to stay in Florida. Republicans approved 2 bills to ban diversity programs in colleges and expand the quote-unquote "don't say gay" law. The bills, expected to be signed into law by DeSantis, have sparked criticisms from Democrats and highlighted the divisive cultural issues dominating the state's legislative session. To bolster his conservative agenda and presidential aspirations, Governor DeSantis has driven a hard line against diversity programs in higher education, with the proposed bills banning colleges from using state or federal funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion. According to DeSantis, such initiatives, sometimes called DEI, are racially divisive and have no place in Florida education system. The bills were passed by the Republican supermajorities in the House and Senate, with DeSantis expected to sign them into law soon. These bills have fueled Florida's already divisive political climate. As the legislative session ends, the state's lawmakers remain divided over the direction of Florida's future and the impact of these bills on its citizens. Feels like a broken record here, Dr. Monago, but how does it not feel like outright war against the citizens of Florida with all of the hell that Ron DeSantis and his Republican acolytes are raining down on anybody who is not white, male, and straight?
Listen closely so I won't confuse you, because I can talk in ways that can be very, very layered. Earlier I mentioned, did Biden come to ground zero to get the troops excited about their power and what's in their hands in the capacity to resist? I'm aware that Vice President Harris went there to talk about the issue that she raised. But for example, even despite the indictments, Trump is the leading Republican candidate because he uses his image because it's iconic and it can influence. Well, Biden is the poster child, the leader of the Democratic Party. He is the person who is the leader in the one who everybody sees as the most powerful Democrat in the country. So it would be strategically powerful if he agreed with me that what's happening in Florida is not a good thing for democracy, and he could go there and make a statement to fire up people, to get more people to support the defenders and have them come out into the streets to be more resistant and loud about this anarchy that's occurring. So I say that to the Democrats and to Biden, if he's listening, he probably is, that if he really believes that what's happening at ground zero in Florida is unconstitutional and racist and wrong, that he says so. That's a strategy that will wake people up. He got into office during a democratic process, which means that there's millions of people, including in Florida, who voted for him. It's time for him to speak to them. It's time for him to speak to people in Texas. It's time for him to be the president of the Democratic Party, as well as the country, and raise people's ire against this war that's going to continue on us. Those people have a leader, including Trump and others, who are fighting for them from an iconic perspective, not a passive, only congressional or legislative perspective, but they're coming out personally to say, I don't agree with this. Right. Everything that's happening in Florida, including being against the equivalent of CRT, critical race theory on a local level, the people in the Democratic Party can say something about this in ways that are not passive or quiet or silent and take a stand. That's part of a good strategy to throw a wrench in this stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think that it's important that the bully pulpit is used. I know that President Biden was in Florida in February. That was several months ago, so maybe that's not frequent enough travel. But I want to go to you, Lauren, on this because you made the point about the media and the role that they play in giving microphone, normalizing DeSantis or even a Donald Trump, and tending to not find as much excitement in covering people like President Biden or Vice President Kamala Harris, really taking it to the Democrats. What's your take on how this whole messaging around Democrats being strong enough against DeSantis in Florida?
Yeah, the media, you know, to your point there, obviously when you're making money through clicks and view counts and you find that the person that made you money, which was Donald Trump, is gone. And I think this is the dangerous paradigm that we find ourselves in. He's gone, but he may return. And as you can see just from CNN, the media is not interested in anything other than, just like most big, you know, corporate entities, making money. So that I don't know that they're that interested in saving our democracy per se, even though every time you look around, you're seeing some saving our democracy forum. But the fact that they're so, you know, not into Kamala Harris and not even really into Joe Biden. I mean, the critical a lot of times is Joe Biden, despite all the stats on how well he's doing on the employment numbers and everything else. You know, the fact is the media wants Donald Trump to come back. That's why we're seeing him next week. That's why there's a town hall with Donald Trump on CNN. I mean, give me a break. It's so obvious what this is. And DeSantis does not bring that same level of excitement. You know, he had that foray that he went on, and there was kind of a shrug of the shoulders from the donor class, and I think to some extent the media class. They're looking for somebody, the media, is looking for somebody that's going to bring the gate, that's going to bring the money, it's going to bring the clicks, it's going to bring...
Okay, I think we lost Lauren for a second.
Media is racist.
So that's the paradigm we find ourselves in. And really, until you throw people out of office, you've got nothing. And on the local level in Florida, that's what has to happen. There are people who have to be thrown out of office. There has to be a forward strategy from those actors on the ground to dismantle who is in charge in Florida on the local level. And then, of course, it goes up from there. But when you run people like Charlie Crist and he loses by almost 20 points, I mean, you can't make those types of mistakes over and over again. You just can't. But Florida, to me, is, you know, an example of what happens when one of the parties really just loses its grip and loses its control, and then the other party that's just sort of playing for keeps dominates. And that's what you're seeing in this moment. But, of course, that can change. That can change in 2 or 3 years, but there's got to be some strategy behind it, some really serious, deliberate strategy behind it. And we're not seeing that right now.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Haynes, I'm going to get you in on this. I wrote, you know, 2 books about the midterms, and DeSantis was dishonorably featured in both of them. They were about how radical Republicans are. And Lauren just mentioned Charlie Crist, who was already governor. He served in the House. He had a pretty robust and I think far more compelling platform, but it doesn't seem like policy and accomplishments are really winning over Democratic voters in the same way that these attacks on non-white, non-heterosexual voters are winning over Republicans. What's your take on how DeSantis was overwhelmingly successful in being reelected with these kinds of focuses that he made the centerpiece of his agenda?
Because the central character here is ideology. We're not talking about policy, because if we were talking about policy, then a lot of people wouldn't vote against their own interests. And historically, that's just been the case in this country. When we think about the way that some... Hello?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. When you think about the way that some demographics of women vote, they absolutely vote against their own interests time after time after time. So we're voting for ideology, you know, in this instance. And this ideology is wrapped in a mantra. It's wrapped in an idea. It's wrapped in this concept that they're coming for you. They want to take everything away from you. They want to disempower men. They want to turn all the little boys and the little girls into LGBTQIA. So all of the fear tactics around this mythical identity that they are clinging onto, that they have created, is driving this. It has absolutely nothing to do with policy. And, I'll even go so far as to say that it does have its own logic. If you are constantly concerned with your own demise, if you are constantly concerned that your own power is waning, you're going to do everything within the power you still believe yourself to have to make sure that that does not happen. And that in and of itself is why this is white supremacy. And I want to be very clear about, when I say that, I am not saying all white folks. There's some cool allies out there, absolutely. What I am saying is when you prescribe to the idea that white is superior and must at all costs be in control of all things, that is absolutely white supremacy. And there are people out there that look like us that also traffic in those ideas, that also are, pushing their agenda too. So this thing is layered. And again, as a Southerner, I have a very kind of unique understanding of people who think this way. And it's concerning because when I think about what had to happen in the South, all the different elements lining up in a very particular way for civil rights to even happen, a thing that people do not contemplate, there's a question out there in the political science sphere. What would have happened if JFK would have gotten assassinated? Would the civil rights package have passed if LBJ was not in office? Right. It's a hard question to contemplate because that was such an ugly moment in our history. But so many things had to align perfectly for that to happen. And so when we're looking at the moving backwards, the descend, the descending nature of all of this, what things need to align perfectly for this country to get back on track, if we were ever on track in the first place. Yeah. But the direction that we're heading in right now, it's nothing good, and I am worried. I am absolutely worried.
I think for good reason. To Lauren's earlier point, our best bet might be the fact that the media isn't particularly enthused with the DeSantis. He has zero charm, no charisma. He's very awkward. He's not and so I don't think that he's going to capture the hearts in the same way that, unfortunately, Donald Trump has. So that might actually be the best thing the rest of us, people who are sane, have working for us, because he, in my view, is a lot more dangerous than Trump because he's actually competent and he's a lot more craven. So we're going to keep an eye on what's happening with Florida and DeSantis. We'll have more Roland Martin Unfiltered streaming live on the Black Star Network after the break.
Up next on The Frequency with me, Dee Barnes, our special guest, Alicia Garza, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to discuss her new book, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart.
We live in a world where we have to navigate, when we say something, people look at us funny, but when a man says the same thing, less skillfully than we did, right? Right. And everybody flocks towards what they said, even though it was your idea.
Right here on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
On the next Get Wealthy with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, nurses are the backbone of the healthcare industry, and yet only 7% of them are Black. What's the reason for that low number? Well, a lack of opportunities and growth in their profession. Joining us on the next Get Wealthy is Needy Bartonelli. She's going to be sharing exactly what nurses need to do and what approach they need to take ownership of their success.
So the Black Nurse Collaborative really spawned from a place and a desire to create opportunities to uplift each other, those of us in the profession, to also look and reach back and create pipelines and opportunities for other nurses like us.
That's right here on Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network.
Hey everybody, it's your man Fred Hammond.
Hi, my name is Brescia Webb, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Well, I like a nice filter usually, but we can be unfiltered.
A new report by ProPublica alleges Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has deeper financial ties with Republican donor Harlan Crow than previously known. According to the report, Crow paid for the private school tuition of Thomas's grandnephew, Mark Martin, who Thomas claimed was his son. The report claims that in 2009, Crow paid $6,200 monthly tuition for Martin's attendance at Hidden Lake Academy, citing a bank statement and an interview with a former administrator at the school. Crow's office has denied any wrongdoing, stating that the donations were made solely from personal funds and were meant to support at-risk youth through schooling. The report has been seized upon by Democrats pushing for greater oversight and a formal code of conduct for the Supreme Court. However, any legislative efforts to implement such a code will likely face opposition from Republicans who defended Thomas during a recent judiciary hearing. The justices have also resisted proposals for independent oversight and mandatory compliance with ethics rules, instead pledging voluntary adherence to a general code of conduct. All right, y'all. Clarence Thomas is the gift that keeps on not giving. Dr. Manago, I'm going to start with you because this is such a juxtaposition between how all of these resources were devoted to prosecute the now acquitted / mistrialed Mayor Gillum, and yet it's a big shoulder shrug. Obviously, Justice Thomas, doesn't have to adhere to any code of conducts, but it's such a huge difference in the way that these two Black men are being treated, and it's looking kind of like Republican and Democrat to me. What's your take?
My take is that this redundant, systematic perspective and activity is boring. That's my perspective. They doing what they do.
Yeah.
Someone earlier said that people are supporting, I think the sister said that people are going against their own interests. Well, this billionaire was supporting his own interests by underscoring the power and the resources of Clarence Thomas. They're just doing what they do. I mean, what's next? This is how I look at it.
Yeah.
But I want to say, and I hope it doesn't sound off topic, is that I don't agree that people are voting against their own interests. I think people will have multiple interests. I think the women that voted for Donald Trump, even though he was grabbing body parts, which remain nameless, were supporting white power because that's their interest. I don't fully agree with Burke when she mentioned that CNN is just chasing dollars. I think that's true, but CNN is chasing dollars and also keeping white power in place and making decisions, including bringing on Barkley and these other people that they now have as their token Black people, to perpetuate a certain white supremacist or a certain apologetic for white supremacist narrative. And it all goes back to different ways of keeping white folks in power, and that's what this billionaire was doing when they supported Clarence Thomas. This issue is going to go away, and we're going to be talking about something else because nothing's going to happen to Clarence Thomas.
Oh, well, we know
Because
that.
unlike Gillum, he is steeped in whiteness, and his lifestyle is steeped in whiteness, and he affirms through his behavior and his legislative decisions or his Supreme Court decisions, white supportive legislation.
Yeah.
So his back is covered. Gillum's was not.
Right. Lauren, Dr. Monago called out his disagreement with your statement. Do you want to respond to that?
No, I mean, it's all about money all the time. All about money all the time. You know, you saw it the first time Trump showed up. I mean, there's really nothing to see here. It's obvious that what the media does has to do with dollars. That's why I was really surprised actually to see Fox let Tucker Carlson walk out the door, because he was bringing money. And so that was a surprising moment. It couldn't have been because of what they've cited, but the point is,
it's just an example that it's not just about money. That's an example that it's not just about money. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Lauren, that money is in there, but the narrative and the deduction of white people needing to be in power is there too. I mean, they don't have. I mean, you know, Roland used to be on the show, and why they got rid of Roland? Come on now, they want whiteness to be the blanket of consciousness for the United States of America too, at the Caucasian News Network, at CNN.
But I mean, to be fair, and I'll let Lauren jump back in because you guys are talking back and forth. If that is the case, Tucker Carlson was literally the poster boy for white nationalism and white supremacy at Fox News. So I do tend to agree with Lauren's position because ultimately, you know, what Tucker Carlson ultimately ended up being is a liability because of the massive settlement that they had to pay out, and they were facing even more, they still are facing more cases against them. So, I mean, we can
afford it. And there'll be another Tucker Carlson coming.
Oh, absolutely.
They have a conveyor belt.
And that's the thing. Yeah, there's definitely a longer pipeline of white supremacists, white nationalists willing to get on TV and espouse that, as opposed to a Roland Martin Unfiltered that you get to have, or Roland Martin that you get to have on CNN. Okay, Lauren, back to you, and then I'm going to get Dr. Hayes in on this.
I mean, but to go back to what you were saying, Reese, about the whole Clarence Thomas situation, you know, what you're seeing is a political party with no shame that'll do anything to win.
Right.
And the Democrats have not reached that point where they'll do everything and anything to win. They're still holding on to some of the old-fashioned politics, the old-fashioned rules, right? So, you know, you have not only a political party in the Republican Party that'll do anything to win with absolutely no shame and no apologies, but they are actually, you know, they're to a point really where they just don't, they have no rules. They have no internal rules or episodic rules. They just do what they want. And they have a media echo chamber that they organized really, to me, right after Barack Obama showed up. It was the Breitbart folks. It was, you know, Tucker Carlson owning Daily Caller. They have that ecosystem, and that right-wing ecosystem pushes the narrative really hard, and they all push together. The Democrats don't do that. And frankly, the Democrats have a bigger umbrella of people that they have to please.
Right.
That's a tricky thing to take care of, right?
Yeah.
You've got the big umbrella, you've got to please all these constituencies. The Republicans don't have that problem. And so they're all pushing in the same direction. That is why Clarence Thomas can find himself in this laughable situation where, you know, to Roy Wood's point on Saturday night, we have a person that owns a Supreme Court justice. So, you know, I mean, this is just what this is. This billionaire owns Clarence Thomas, and nobody's going to do anything about it. The Democrats aren't going to push hard enough. They're not going to play by a set of rules that's really going to make something, quote, happen. And so when you do that up against people who are going to make something happen no matter what, you're going to lose. It's as simple as that. It comes down to who wants it more a lot of times in life. And that's what we're seeing in politics.
Well, to be fair, somebody owns Neil Gorsuch, too, because he's gotten a windfall. Brett Kavanaugh, all of them got something going on. It's just Clarence Thomas is the easiest target, and for good reason. Okay, Dr. Hayes, I'm going to rely on you to be the non-cynical one among us and tell us if you think that we shouldn't be shrugging this off. What's your take on this Clarence Thomas situation?
Gotta hear this.
Well, you know, I'll go back to my earlier statement about the doomsday clock. I'm not saying that to be histrionic, but really democracy is like teetering on the brink right now. And, you know, One of the things that's interesting when you belong to a populist party, and pretty much right now, this version of republicanism is what we are looking at. The one thing that you do not need is a coalition. The only thing that you need are your followers or your fans, right? Your acolytes. That's the only thing that you need. And the way that the way that the judicial system was maneuvered over the past few years, we are in a situation where that populist group of people are the people who can decide the fate of a Clarence Thomas. Now, as an appointee myself, I got to say it's very disappointing to constantly read, which has been great journalism by ProPublica, by the way. Shout out to real journalists out there. Right. That all of these things are happening and it's just being brushed away by, it was just, we're friends, we're buddies. It's so cavalier when I think about other people, who aren't lifelong appointees like justices are. But when I think about other types of appointments, you're going to get in some trouble here for a fraction of the things, even the hint of impropriety is, damaging. So I think for the system, for people to believe in it, for people to buy into it, for you to think that, I'm going to act in a certain way because if I don't, there's a level of punishment. But if there's no accountability for anything, then what is that buy-in? What is that buy-in for democracy? What is that buy-in for, I want to do my duty and work for my country and all these different things. So this is a crisis in my personal opinion, because when you sign up for any sort of duty for your country, you're signing up because you believe in, some of the values that America says that it stands for. So right now, this is a true test. This is a true test about who we want to be. And democracy is absolutely wrapped up in this, because if Clarence Thomas gets away with this, I don't know where we stand. And I'll just say one last thing. Over the years when I've taught an American political science class, policy, law, and politics, I cannot tell you how many students over the years, even before all of this stuff with Clarence Thomas and taking away women's rights, would always ask, well, how is the court impartial when we already know their ideological leanings? Yeah. And that is not the way law is supposed to function, right? So that in and of itself has always been hanging over the court's head in terms of credibility. But where we are right now, the credibility of the court is literally in the ground. So what are we going to do about that? If we are out there talking about democracy, selling democracy, trying to convince other countries that this is the way to go, this situation right here is a test and we need to pass it. And right now, I'm not too sure.
I think we're going to fail this epically. I think we lost the Supreme Court when Hillary Clinton did not win the Electoral College, because the bottom line is who gonna check them, boo. The Senate is completely out of the question to get the 60 votes. This is not on the table in terms of expanding the Supreme Court. So looks like we're stuck with a really messed up situation. We'll be right back with more Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network.
That was a pivotal time. I remember Kevin Hart telling me that. He's like, man, what you doing, man? You got to stay on stage. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm young, thinking, I'm good. And he was absolutely right.
What show did you have at the time?
This was one-on-one.
Got it.
During that time. So
you're doing one-on-one, going great, you making money, you like...
I'm like, I don't need to leave. I don't need to leave from, Wednesday, Thursday to Sunday. I didn't want to do that. It was just like, I'm gonna stay here. Or I didn't want to finish work Friday, fly out, go do a gig Saturday, Sunday. I was like, I don't have to do that. And I lost a little bit of that hunger that I had in New York. I would hit all the clubs, run around. Sometimes me and Chappelle, or me and this one or that one, we'd go to the Comedy Cellar at 1 a.m. And that was our life. We loved it. You do 2 shows in Manhattan, go to Brooklyn, leave Brooklyn, go to Queens, go to Jersey. And I got complacent. I was like, I got this money, I'm good. I don't need to go chase that, because that money wasn't at the same level that I was making, but what I was missing was that training.
Yes.
Was that.
And it wasn't the money.
It was the money. You know, it was that's what I needed.
Next on The Frequency with me, Dee Barnes, our special guest, Alicia Garza, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to discuss her new book, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart.
We live in a world where we have to navigate, you know, when we say something, people look at us funny, but when a man says the same thing less skillfully than we did, right? Right. Everybody flocks towards what they said, even though it was your idea.
Right here on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
You want me to do something crazy, but I don't know what to do. I'd rather just sit here.
Hi, this is Cheryl Lee Ralph, and you are watching Roland Martin, Unfiltered. I mean, could it be any other way? Really? It's Roland Martin.
Lismore disappeared from his Fort Pierce, Florida home on April 2nd, 2023. The 15-year-old is 6 feet tall, weighs 155 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. Anyone with information about Kennard Lismore should call the Fort Pierce, Florida Police Department at 772-461-3820. Here are a couple of stories that we're following today. The Memphis, Tennessee District Attorney revealed Tyree Nichols' cause of death to his family. According to the medical examiner's medical autopsy report, Tyree died of brain injuries from blunt force trauma. First responders told Nichols' mother that her son was drunk and high. The reports contradict that. The medical examiner's findings show that Tyree's blood alcohol level was 0.049, less than the legal limit to drive. Nichols died 3 days after officers beat him during a January 7th traffic stop. Footage of the altercation shows police striking Nichols repeatedly. 7 Memphis Police Department officers have been fired for their roles in the arrest. 5 of them have been charged with second-degree murder in connection with Nichols' death. A former Alabama sheriff's deputy pleaded guilty in federal court to sexually assaulting a woman while he was on duty more than 3 years ago. Joshua Davidson, a former deputy with the Dallas County Sheriff's Office, confessed to placing the victim in custody and then driving her down a dark road to a desolate area where the woman performed oral sex on him against her will. Prosecutors say the woman reported the assault immediately and said she was scared that Davidson would shoot her if she did what he said. Davidson faces life in prison. His sentencing is scheduled to be sentenced August 25th. The man who had Metro Atlanta on lockdown Wednesday is behind bars, facing multiple charges. 24-year-old Dion Patterson is charged with murder and 4 counts of aggravated assault. Police say Patterson opened fire Wednesday at Northside Hospital Medical Midtown, where his mother had taken him for an appointment. He had fled the scene, causing an 8-hour-long search over several metro counties before being captured. Patterson's mother told the Associated Press the former Coast Guardsman had some mental instability going on from medication he got from the Veterans Affairs health system and began taking Friday. She said her son wanted Ativan to deal with anxiety, depression, but the VA refused to give it to him, saying the drug would be too addicting. His mother has apologized for her son's actions. Amy St. Pierre, a CDC worker, was killed. Lisa Glenn, Georgette Whitlow, Jasmine Daniel, and Alicia Hollinger were critically injured. Whew, that is a lot of heaviness to cover. I will leave it to you all to decide which story in particular you want to start off commenting with. I do find it heartbreaking and also interesting that this week we have two stories where we have former veterans, or veterans I should say, that are talking about mental health issues, and we've seen it manifest differently. We saw it with Jordan Neely on the subway when he was, killed. It was ruled a homicide by a former Marine, and now we see this with Deion Patterson in Atlanta. Absolutely abhorrent on both sides, but I do wonder if there is something to examine there in terms about his mother's claim of mental health. Dr. Managa, I'll start with you. What's your take on that?
Well, clearly, the young man was dealing with mental health challenges, and that's a problem in this country. As a matter of fact, if you look at this statistically, it's a growing problem. Suicide, homicide, all the sides, and depression are booming in this country. Some of that was exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. But not only is mental health, which has been a problem all of my career, which is based around addressing mental health. I remember being on a panel 30 years ago with the psychologist who was the consultant to the Cosby Show, whose name escapes me, Poussaint. I believe his name is Alvin Poussaint. We talked about mental illness, particularly among Black people, on a panel 30 years ago, because he had a book out about the disproportionate problem of mental illness and suicide among Black people. But the other underlying issue that's going on here is the problem of the lack of gun control,
right,
or the lack of legislation or systems in place to prevent the, as I predicted on this very show some years ago, problem of growing murders by guns in this country. It's going to get worse, so we need to all be careful and watch our surroundings. But getting back, and this is my analysis, getting back to the issue of white supremacy control, one of the reasons why we may never see a effective gun control policy in this country is because white folks who are concerned about backlash and who are concerned about Black power and losing their numbers in terms of control want to be able to defend themselves in case something goes down. And no matter how many people who are murdered, including children, on massive levels, they're resistant to not having control of their guns, is my perspective. That phenomena is at the core of why, despite all this insanity that's occurring at the hands of guns, there's been no legislation or serious resistance to stop to that occurring and stopping that phenomena.
Yeah.
So this issue is relevant to mental health and an ongoing example of the problem of the lack of gun control and relevant policy in this country.
Right, and Georgia, Brian Kemp has made it easier to access guns. We don't know, at least I haven't seen reporting on whether his guns were legally purchased or anything of that nature, but this is why we have red flag laws, or that's why we have people advocating for red flag laws, for background checks. And it's questionable if you have a history of, mental health struggles, whether you should have a gun or not. That was a big issue in the Senate race down there with Herschel Walker admitting to having mental issues and having experiences with guns. Nola, I'm going to open up the floor. I don't want to frame a question to you. Anything in particular you want to comment about from these three stories?
Like you said, they're all heavy, right? And reading yet another story about police violence and a young Black man losing his life, that just does something to you. It makes you feel, it just makes you feel exhausted in another way. And I think, because we are having these conversations around mental health, and I do believe this is Mental Health Month.
Yeah, actually it is. Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with these issues are exacerbated by COVID and quarantine in a way that we are not talking about. There is something going on. We've always, we've in this country, we've suffered from gun violence for quite some time. Since quarantine, the level of violence, the level of mental illness that is peaking, it seems extraordinary. And I think this is a wider conversation about why folks are resulting to such extreme ends, right? And on a daily, nearly hourly, like what appeals to a person about massive violence. And the way that I think about this is I think about this along with terrorism and why terrorists decide to do the things that they do. And typically it's for some sort of attention. So if that is the case, if we can apply that here, if we can apply that logic here, what attention are these people seeking? You know, when they commit these massive these massive violent attacks. Now, in our country, if you look a particular way, you're going to be given the benefit of the doubt, and that analysis is going to try to get to, you know, why this person decided to do what they did. But when you're Black, we don't often have the benefit of the doubt for people to say, okay, what were the triggers here? What were the causes here? But I think we are definitely in a crisis, and we need to figure out, why are people resorting to this tactic? What attention are they needing, and how can we begin to address this? Because my suspicion is the summer is going to be even more violent. That is my suspicion. And, you know, because we are stranglehold by the NRA and people who support the NRA, and people have access to guns, I am very worried about very basic things. You know, there are tons of concerts that are happening, tons of people gathering in public locations, and inflation, all these different things that pile onto this mental health. So I'm very curious about what is the attention that they are seeking and the triggers. You know, are they even being, are they visiting places, you know, in the internet that are kind of radicalizing people? Like, what is drawing people to do this? Almost as if it's romantic in a kind of dark sense. You know what I mean? Like, what are the triggers here? So that's my thinking around all of this. What's driving people to do this?
I don't know, but I wish they would leave the rest of us out of it, because I think it's insane to go to work or to go to a doctor's appointment and somebody decides to have an episode, and now 4 women are dead. And we don't know if that was targeted because they were women and that's why he shot them, or if it was just an opportunity. He just got whoever he saw first. But either way, it's exceedingly appalling, and nothing is going to happen in Georgia, we know, because there's no appetite for any more gun control there, just like there hasn't been in Tennessee, despite the shootings there. But there was one thing in particular about the Tyree Nichols story that bothered me, was the way that the cops lied to the family and said that he was drunk and high. We saw the same thing happen with Ahmaud Arbery, where his family was told that he was breaking into the house. And so we consistently see that it's not enough for these people to summarily execute Black people for traffic stops, but they have to humiliate them and to impugn their character, even though eventually it's going to come out on tape, whether it's body camera footage or maybe some Samaritan's footage. And so that's just so disturbing that they had to further debase him after leaving him on the scene unattended, taking pictures, allegedly, one of the cops was reportedly doing. It's just egregiously tragic.
It's also a cliche.
Yeah.
It's also a cliche. I mean, that's the way they do it. That's the way they did it in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2020s. This is a redundant cliche. This is part of the playbook. It's what you do when you kill somebody as a cop.
Lauren?
It's a little bit more than a redundant cliche. The Atlanta case obviously was mental illness. The gentleman on the subway in New York.
Lauren, can you hold that thought? We got to take a break. We'll come right back straight to you. Okay. Be right back.
Okay. All right.
Next on The Black Table with me, Greg Carr, we look at one of the most influential and prominent Black Americans of the 20th century. His work literally changed the world. Among other things, he played a major role in creating the United Nations. He was the first African American and first person of color to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And yet today, he is hardly a household name. We're talking, of course, about Ralph J. Bunche. A new book refers to him as the absolutely indispensable man,
his lifelong interest and passion in racial justice, specifically in the form of colonialism. And he saw his work as an activist and advocate for the Black community here in the United States as just the other side of the coin of his work trying to roll back European empire in Africa.
Author Cal Rostiala will join us to share his incredible story. That's on the next Black Table, here on the Black Star Network.
Up next on The Frequency with me, Dee Barnes, our special guest, Alicia Garza, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to discuss her new book, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart.
We live in a world where we have to navigate, when we say something, people look at us funny, but when a man says the same thing, less skillfully than we did, right? Right. Everybody flocks towards what they said, even though it was your idea.
Right here on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
Black TV does matter, dang it.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy, Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now.
Lauren, I had to cut you off right before the break, but I want to bring you back in to finish your thought.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say that, obviously the situation in Atlanta was obviously mental illness. Ahmaud Arbery and Jordan Neely and all of these other things that we've been talking about, Tyre Nichols was beaten to death by the police as the paramedics looked on and did absolutely nothing. This really crazy situation with Jordan Neely on the subway, the level of the lack of compassion around that is just really stunning and really embarrassing. But, when we take this all as a full picture over the last, maybe 10 years or so, maybe less than 10 years, we've been watching now, black male after black male after black male getting murdered on video now for quite a while.
Yeah.
Walter Scott getting shot in the back 5 times, and Eric Garner getting choked to death, and Philando Castile, all of this. If it was any other group of people in American society, I think there'd be a little bit more of a reaction. Now, I'm not saying that, black women haven't been killed and other people haven't been killed, but that particular group, black men, we're seeing this on video. We're seeing people get murdered on video. And, when Philando Castile put the Facebook Live on of really himself being killed, this type of thing should not be seen as normal.
Right.
The idea that a guy that's homeless is getting choked out on the New York City subway and the freaking governor and the mayor have no reaction to that other than to be like, oh, well, mental illness, whatever. New York Times, mental illness, because nobody wants to deal with the fact that this shouldn't happen in a civilized society. What is everybody doing? I mean, I'm from New York. I've been on the subway 1 trillion times, and this idea that everybody's just sort of standing around while a guy gets choked to death because, he's homeless, so no big deal. So I don't know where our compassion is or where our humanity is, but something is wrong here. We are spiraling in a way that I think is just not normal. And I know that part of it is the advent of video and social media and the fact that we see these things. Before the cell phone, we didn't see a lot of these police shootings. We heard about them. John Lewis, of course, referred to police brutality at the March on Washington.
Yeah.
Malcolm X talked about police brutality all the time. So we knew that it was going on, but to see it, to see people getting murdered on video is a thing. And we shouldn't be okay with any of this. We just shouldn't be.
I wholeheartedly agree with you.
I want to be real. I'm sorry.
Let me get this point and then I'll go right to you. I do agree with you because when it comes to Jordan Neely in particular, the chokehold part was something that we as Black people have been saying we want to get outlawed as part of the Justice in Policing, George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. And there's been rightful dissatisfaction with the fact that that hasn't passed. And then we see a video of another Black man, this time not by a cop, being executed essentially through the same kind of chokehold that we don't want to have police be allowed to do under any circumstances. And there's a lot more justification around this because he was screaming, because people may have been scared, because I've heard that crime is up and it's been scary lately on the subway. But a human being who is clearly distressed about being thirsty, about being hungry, and nobody seems to react in a way of trying to offer any kind of aid in that way. Offer a bottle of water to see if that de-escalates. It just goes right to violence against this person, and we definitely are lacking an empathy chip in our society.
Lisa, your point about crime is absolutely correct. I get it. You know, and obviously somebody who's the daughter of a cop in New York, I totally understand what you're saying. But when we saw the George Floyd thing, we're talking about watching a guy begging for his life over some BS 20, counterfeit nonsense that somebody freaking called about.
Yeah.
And it's another black male. It's another, to me, these things are forms of lynching.
Yeah, I agree.
And this history repeats itself. And now we're seeing it on video. There's nothing slowing it down. Nobody's saying, okay, wow, we're seeing it on video now, so I guess we should stop doing it. No, we're just seeing it on video, and now everybody's just watching people get murdered and choked out, and we're acting like this is normal, and it sure as hell isn't.
Right.
So it's a wild thing to think about,
Dr. Banago, you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, I want to make clear what I was referring to when I said this is a cliche. What I was referring to was cops lying about what happened as a cliche. So I want to be real clear, because I would never want to normalize or dismiss the horror of black men being murdered, which is a norm in this culture, frankly, as a cliche, because there's too much humanity to put that in the category of cliche. I was talking about the fact that cops lie about what went down. I used to work in law enforcement. I used to wear a deputy sheriff's outfit in East Los Angeles in California. And I saw young black men be disfigured, murdered, maimed on a weekly basis, sometimes all day, every day in a week.
Yeah.
I was one of these people that back in the day who rebelled against police brutality and was dismissed because no one really cared. I was also alive and well when the first main videotape attack came on television, which was Rodney King.
Yeah.
And they thought, and people acted, including in LA, acted like that was, oh my God, that's a cliche in terms of a normal thing that happens to black men all the time. And that's why I made the contrast earlier between Gillum and Trump in terms of what they look like, though both of them have been indicted.
Yeah.
The black man is more dismissible, more dehumanizing, but not just among people who are not black, but among black people too, not because we're deficient or something's wrong with us naturally, but we're trained to be anti-black as well. Somebody used the term earlier that Clarence Thomas was owned. Clarence Thomas has no problem being owned by white people because he has such distaste for black people.
Yeah.
We have work to do among black people to teach us to unlearn what I call the anti-black trauma trends that we're in as a people, that makes us go into a default short circuit when it comes to successfully, effectively defending black life in this country.
Oh, I agree.
A moment ago, we've been talking about police brutality forever. When I was a baby and I was looking at the police, at the Black Panthers, that was what motivated them to come into being, was people being murdered by the cops. And there was a guy named Daryl Gates, who used to be the chief of police for LAPD, who was murdering black people left and right, and publicly said that it's because we're not normal, which is why we were killed. Then we went on about our business. I'll close by reiterating that there needs to be more focus on waking up black people from what I call the trauma trance, because it's that trauma trance that's getting worse, that's making us go crazy instead of go effective.
Yeah.
Someone also said that they believe it's attention getting. I think it's implosion based on the dismissiveness of people's capacity to have a critical analysis. People are being dumbed down by the internet. People are being dumbed down by people becoming celebrities based on how many hits they get or whatever. But common sense and intelligence is not really supported. And some people are just going crazy and going off because they're imploding based on a lack of space to express what's really going on with them in a society, where the Republican Party in particular is constantly repressing people's common sense, and the Democratic Party is complacent enough to look like they're co-signing it by the lack of action against it. And I must say one more time that the President of the United States, who's Biden, can step up and explicitly resist some of these things and get some momentum going against them, because he is indeed the President of the United States of this country. And I haven't seen enough of that. Sitting Miss Harris is the same thing as sitting the president.
Dr. Haynes, I heard you trying to jump in there. What's your comment?
Yeah, I was playing a little bit of double dutch there. I just want to say we can go back historically and we can find photos of literal Black bodies being hung by trees and people standing around as if, that's the Friday night date. So Black death as entertainment has been something that's been entertaining for people in this country for quite some time. And, now that we are in a social science way treated, and what I mean by that is that we are kind of preconditioned in a way. We've been preconditioned to accept a set of things, right? So we have been preconditioned to the violence that is enacted on Black bodies, and I'm not using Black bodies in an academic sense. I mean that in a very real and physical sense that is supported by decades of data. Black bodies, particularly the male, has fascinated and also emasculated other men, right? And so it's something very particular about Black men who just try to live their very best lives without, people trying to harm them, are threats because other people have made them threats because of their own inferiority complexes, whatever they may be. And Black men can also have those same inferiority complexes against other Black men. So that's one historical point that I want to make. Throughout history, you can go back and see photos of Black people hanging from trees and white folks gathering around as if it's a picnic, right? So This is an extension of that. And because we see it over and over and over again, that's the treatment part. We are desensitized, and that's dangerous because you're like, oh, another one. Oh, another one.
Yeah.
Oh, another one. And that's problematic. And so the last thing that I'll say really quickly here is, until there was a substantial drug problem with meth in suburban white areas, people started to care about the drug epidemic that was happening in this country. When it was crack, people did not care, right? But when it was meth and when it was other drugs, people started to care. So we're in this weird situation where even little white kids that are being murdered, guns are still out there. So what's going to happen if little white kids are being murdered, but guns, it's still perfectly fine for any and everybody to be able to get a gun? What does that say about Black folks and other folks of color in this country when even little white kids that are being murdered isn't enough for gun violence to cease in this country? Where does that leave us, right? So I think collectively, we need to strategize around these very pivotal questions because we need to save our own lives, because that's very clear. Because us continuing to die and it being used as entertainment, that ain't it.
Right. Well, I think that's a great way, call to action to end the show. We got to save our own lives, and part of that means not dismissing the Jordan Neelys of the world and not justifying preemptive violence against Black people because somebody feels like they are, did you say 3 minutes? You might feel like they are a threat. I'm sorry, I feel like I missed a cue there. But okay, that does it for us tonight on Roland Martin Unfiltered. I want to thank my panel, Lauren Victoria Burke, Dr. Nola Haynes, and Dr. Clea Monago. Thanks to Roland for letting me hold it down in the studio while he's in New York at the Legal Defense Fund's 35th National Equal Justice Awards dinner. I'm sure having a very fabulous time. Don't forget to download the Black Star Network on all platforms, including iPhone, Apple Plus, Fire TV. Don't you dare go anywhere. Black Star's newest show, The Frequency with Dee Barnes, the legendary hip-hop journalist, is coming on next. Dee talks to one of the Black Lives Matter co-founders, Alicia Garza, about her latest book, The Purpose of Power: How We Come Together When We Fall Apart. The Frequency with Dee Barnes starts right now.
Welcome to The Frequency. I'm your host, Dee Barnes, and thank you for tuning in. All right, we have a special guest for you today. This conversation is going to be so good. It's about the purpose of power. And who do we have? Alicia Garza. You know that name because she is one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we're going to talk about this book and organizing and all kinds of organizations and how do we gain power. And right now on the frequency, welcome Alicia Garza. What's up, sis?
Hello, my love. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Great to see you too. And thank you for taking the time. I appreciate you. I have to talk to you about your book, The Purpose of Power. But first, I want the audience to get to know you a little bit more. Where did you grow up?
You know, I am a Bay Area born and raised, homegrown hand grenade, as they say.
Yes, one of my favorites. I love that title, Sonia Sanchez. Yes.
Right, giving homage to our sister.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in the Bay Area. I grew up for the first part of my life, well, all my younger life in Marin County, which is like north, I think, of San Francisco. It's on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge, right in between the Golden Gate Bridge and the Richmond Bridge. And then I lived in Oakland for about 20-something years until I recently moved to the state of Georgia.
See, these are rich cultural cities that you're in, deep, deep, deep in the community.
Definitely.
So what led you to your path to become an activist?
You know, I would say that my initial kind of path here was through my mother. I don't think she meant to do it.
Right.
I don't think she meant to do it, but a couple of things. One, my mom used to tell me to look up everything, right? I remember one time she brought me home a t-shirt. My mom loved free stuff.
Yes.
She brought me home a t-shirt from the 7-Eleven and it said free Kuwait. And I was like, what's Kuwait? She was like, look it up. And this was before the internet.
I was just about to say that. My mom did the same thing. She brought those, remember the encyclopedias?
Yes. And we
that
had
was our Google.
Because she got hers at the garage sale, right? So
yes,
I was looking it up, like, where is Kuwait? And I would learn about the conflict happening there. But really, there's like an ethos that my mom really, I think, embedded in me, which is that everybody deserves to live with dignity. My mom would say hello to every Black person she ever saw anywhere. And if I didn't say hello to, she would pop me one, you know, and remind me, you always got to say what's up to our people. Because we live in a world where our people are not respected and not even acknowledged. And so I'm going to be a part of that. And also, you know, I'll be honest, my mom, for the first part of my life, was a single mother. And she raised me until I was about 4 with her twin brother. And so my mom would work during the day and my uncle would work at night. And my mom talked to me a lot about how hard that was. She talked to me about how child support really didn't cover much and you had to fight for every 10 cents of it. And she really also talked to me about, you know, the importance of making good decisions with good information, right? She did not tell me anything about birds and bees. I never heard stork stories. She was like, sex makes babies and babies are expensive.
Right. I love that. I love the fact that mothers in particular, especially single moms, they have to, they're so truthful. They don't have time for the fairy tale. Because they're so entrenched in the reality, you know what I mean? My mom instilled the same thing into me with speaking to people, especially speaking to our people. And sometimes because of the world and everything that our people have gone through, there's that shield, that wall, you know, that defense mechanism. And it's always so disarming when you do speak to them.
That's right.
They're like, oh, hey,
why are you talking to me? Right.
Yeah. Why are you talking to me? Or it's like, oh, hey, I guess I can let the shield down a little bit, you know?
That's right.
I have to get into your book now because I feel like that was your upbringing, was your path to write this. Am I wrong or am I right?
You got it. You're right.
The Purpose of Power. I love it. As you can see, I have all my, my little stickies in it. It is amazing. I mean, first of all, I admire anyone who writes a full book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How did you get there? Like, how did you manage to go from beginning to end?
You know, it's really funny. I have a few girlfriends right now who are writing books and they're trying to finish, and they're in the part of book writing, which I call just being in the tunnel.
Yes.
And you're like right in the middle of it. You can't see the light at the end and you can't see where you came from. You're just
right.
And you have to just keep digging and have faith that there's light on the other side. You know, one of the things that really inspired me to write this book, obviously, was my mother.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to her, because my mom always loved my writing and always wanted me to be a writer.
Nice.
Which, you know, I had to, after she passed away, I didn't think I was going to finish the book. And I just knew, like, I got to do this for Mom. She would be very disappointed if I quit in the middle. But there was also like a political imperative for me. And, you know, we were right at the precipice of a major election in this country where we could have made some decisions that were permanent, right?
Right.
And I'm, of course, referring to the election between Trump and Biden.
Yes.
And really, it's not a party thing. You know, I mean, like many Black people, I do what I think is in my best interest.
Right, of course. I mean, most people do.
Right. But for me, you know, what I was looking at was the movement perspective. And, you know, there's not a lot of books on organizing. There's a lot of things that are retrospective and look back. And they're coming from the outside, right? These are people who study people who did the thing. And I think more of us who are actually doing the thing need to write. My book is not the definitive book on organizing, but it was meant to spark a conversation amongst other organizers and people who are trying to create change about what we think it takes and what we're doing it for. This work is really hard. If you don't have clarity about what you're trying to get out of it, then you're not going to be in it for very long. I also really wanted to put at the forefront, sister, that power is actually what we're fighting for. And that is really different than I think a lot of the ways that we talk to each other as Black people, especially about what it is that we want. I think we're taught in some ways that what we want is like white people's version of the thing, but make it Black. And I'm like, I'm not sure. I think we want the ability to make decisions for ourselves. And I think we want the ability to create systems that don't actually result in inequity and poverty and pain. And in order for us to do that, we actually have to consider, what does that take? It's not just empowerment, right? We talk to each other, and we get talked to a lot about feeling good about ourselves in the midst of conditions that are terrible, rather than changing the conditions themselves so that you actually can feel good and be doing good at the same time.
Right.
That's really what I'm trying to put on the table with the purpose of power.
This is amazing. I'm so grateful we're having this conversation because there's so much I want to ask you. First, I want to break down what you said about movement. And it's something you said that was so profound in the book. You said that hashtags do not start movements, people do. That's right. And I was like, hello, because this generation is all about the hashtag. So can you break down what you meant by that?
Yeah, well, you know, I've come to start saying that over the last decade because, you know, with the rise of Black Lives Matter, I think the most common question that I would hear, you know, besides, you know, don't all lives matter, which.
Yes.
Right? But the most common question that I would hear is, well, how did you start a movement from a hashtag? And I was like, I don't understand. That's not what happened here.
Right.
One, these movements are old, right? And they ebb and flow, right? I didn't start a movement. I started an organization with my sisters that is in the Black radical tradition, right? And we didn't create that, right? Our people created that. You know, through unspeakable conditions. And it came before us. And if we do our jobs right, it'll come after us too. but we'll be winning things that have us able to fight for other things, right? We can have new problems to solve instead of trying to keep chipping away at these old
And the same problems.
You know how
I mean, the same problems the generation before us had and it reminds me so much of James Baldwin.
Exactly.
You know, when how long do we have to wait for the progress?
How long must we wait?
How long must we wait for the progress? I'm just, it's profound when you say that you're chipping away at something that we're still dealing with.
We're still dealing with it.
Okay, listen, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to go more into what we're still dealing with right here on the Frequency on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Back right here on the Frequency with Alicia Garza, and we are talking about the movements and the movement that we're in right now and the battles that we are fighting. Yeah, as African Americans are still fighting to this day, that we seem to have been fighting for generations. Alicia, welcome back. When you said that, like I was just telling you, it made me want to laugh and cry at the same time, because why do you think that the progress is taking so long? We've sent out this message over and over again. What is it going to take?
Mm-hmm. You know, I think it's got to take a couple of things.
Yes.
And what I'm going to say, Sister D, you're going to understand deeply. One, I think it takes power. So we need to be making the rules. We need to be the people who are setting the agenda. And we need to have an agenda that is not just focused on a small group of people, but like does the best for the most amount of people.
Right.
So that's one piece. But then there's an internal piece that I really, have been thinking about a ton. As a student of history, I know that all successful movements are interrupted, right? Mm-hmm. And they're often interrupted by outside influences, but they use members of our communities, right? Mm-hmm. To kind of create strife and, discord and disharmony. And, it's interesting because when you look throughout history at every successful movement, right, that has been an element. And the result of it, of course, is that our perspective on what it will take is that nothing can change anything, right? It leads to nihilism. It leads to apathy. We come to think of ourselves as inherently flawed people that can't get anything right. And I think we have to really develop and design tools to protect against that, especially in a culture where we are now bombarded with so much information that we don't know where it comes from.
Right. Right. Before we can fact check.
Yeah, we just absorb it. We just absorb it. We just absorb it. Like, how long did it take for me to learn your story and your history, sister?
Right.
Right. How long has it taken for people to understand that this movement is not hashtag fueled, but organizer fueled?
Exactly.
How long has it taken for people to really understand, what Dr. King was trying to do and what Malcolm X was trying to accomplish, what Sister Rosa was trying to accomplish, and even what this movement is trying to accomplish, and what has gotten in the way of that. I talk about this in the book about, the stories that we tell that I call fairy tales, that we perpetuate, that make us feel better, but confuse us about how change happens and what gets in the way. And I don't subscribe to the notion that we're our own worst enemies, right? I don't do that.
Okay.
But what I will say is, if we really about this life, then we have to be committed to a more nuanced understanding, not just of human fallacy, right? A real thing. But we also have to be really deeply entrenched in the strategies that white supremacy and this government has used to keep itself intact. And we have to hold both of those things together and then make assessments, right, about what we're working with and how it is that we move forward.
Whew. You know, one of the things that each of these movements within the community, I've always, admired and tried to get involved with, but I never understood the process of an organizer and how do you organize? Can you please break that down for the audience? Because I know there's people out there that are like, I want to do something. I feel like I need to do something, but they don't know where to begin. They don't know how the process starts. And I'm one of those people. So please walk me through it because I really want to know. I've been part of, for example, with hip hop, we were part of this process, the All in the Same Gang project, which was to stop gang violence. And I was all in from the music part to the, we had these giveaways and of course, corporate sponsorship got involved and, then it becomes another thing. And then we went to the certain heavily gang influenced area in Los Angeles. And we did the video and we helped the community and then packed up and left. And then I'd never seen them go back to do it. And I felt like that was something that I should have made, picked up the mantle to continue or how. So can you please walk me through like, how do you become an organizer and what are the steps that it takes to create and maintain?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I'm so glad you told that story, Sister D, because, I think where and who you work with is just as important as what you do.
Oof. Yes. Yes. So, you are giving us some truth bombs today. Go ahead.
I often say, it's important to figure out what you care about and to find other people who care about the same things that you do.
Right.
But it's also important to understand or to even consider, right? What's important to me about how the work gets done and who I'm working with. And I often find that people don't do that extra layer, right? And so then they get really deeply disappointed when they encounter something like what you encountered, right? Which was a misalignment, right? Of goals and outcomes, okay?
Yes.
And so, there are so many incredible organizations out there who prioritize and really live their values around, participation, right? And engagement, direct engagement, and really being led by people who are being impacted by the problems that you're trying to solve. People who are more relationship focused and based rather than, but there's lots of different ways to approach change, right? Okay. You can, give stuff away, right? That's a way to approach change.
Right.
And you can also give people the tools that they need to be the change makers themselves.
Exactly.
So whatever your approach is, find a group that shares your approach, not just the same thing you care about. And then the other thing I would say is that organizing is fundamentally about building relationships among people who don't currently know each other, who care about the same things and want to take action together. And so to be an organizer, you really need to first and foremost be somebody who can do good listening.
Right.
Somebody who is also themselves willing to share, your vision, your hopes, your fears, right? And then also someone who is thinking about over time, how do we think we solve this problem? Okay. And I think with organizing, we have this idea, right, that there's one person. This is an example of those fairy tales. We can all name, a leader of a movement, but can we name the engine behind it, right? Like, do people talk about Diane Nash? Do people talk about the fact that Sister Rosa continued to organize well into her 80s, right?
Wow, they don't.
Like literally. And it's because we don't know that, right? We're taught that, for you to be an organizer, you have to be the one with the bullhorn. You got to be the one in front. And that's not what organizing is. Mm-hmm. Organizing is reaching as many people as possible who are looking for you and getting people together to come up with solutions to the challenges that we face. And what's core to that, at the very, very center of it, is being able to build relationships among people who might want the same thing, but they might come from different places. How do you build bridges amongst people's differences in order for us to take action together? Not get rid of the differences. The differences are not a bad thing.
Right.
It's how do you bring all those different elements together so that it becomes a song? Okay. Really what an organizer is.
Is this something that you've always wanted to be when you were growing up? Like, I can't see you as a little child, even though you were raised in Oakland. So you had like the Black Panther, influence, community-based influence on you. But was that something that you wanted to do when you were like younger? You were like, this is what I want to do, maybe politics or something community.
It's so funny. I didn't know what organizing really was until I got to college.
Right.
And, we got to think about that, right? Again, I didn't learn about organizing in middle school or high school, right?
Of course not.
And that was designed, and we can see in places like Florida, places like Alabama, right? They're trying to like reinstate that kind of stuff. Places like Texas, where, they have textbooks that say that there was no slavery. Right? Actually, slavery was people migrating from Africa to come here to work. That's literally what they're teaching in schools, right?
Insane. That's insanity.
It's bizarre. So I didn't grow up learning and knowing about organizing. And then on top of that, Sister D, growing up in the 80s and early 90s, I will say that, at that point, the Panthers were not at their height anymore. And so the way that people talked about that work was quite different. And it wasn't until I got to college and got exposed to texts and people,
right.
work that I was like, I can do that. I'm social, I like to build relationships, but fundamentally I'm a connector. And that I think is my role, right? What I'm good at. I'm good at bringing people together who don't think they have anything in common to like get stuff done together. And so
you really shocked me there for a minute, thinking about your upbringing in Oakland. They're not teaching what the Panthers did in school. It's silence. It's almost, not at all.
Like not at all. But what's cool is as an adult, I can tell you, Panthers are everywhere. Like I run into Panthers at the grocery store, at the doctor's office. When you go out to eat, it's like folks are still very much alive, very much active. A lot of the programs that people began are still in existence and still taking care of our people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So some of it is like being able to also expose people, right, to what's in front of their face. That is also a part of organizing, right? Like we're all taught to see the world a certain way, and the way we're taught to see the world benefits a certain group of people and benefits a certain arrangement. And as an organizer, right, your role is often to expose people to different perspectives, right, and different ways of looking at things, and to really also expose how power operates, right? It wasn't until somebody organized me, right, that I understood, not only was I not taught this stuff, right, but there was actually an agenda behind not teaching me these things. Then I became committed to finding out more, right?
Exactly.
More. I feel like this is what people are doing now on YouTube, but they're going down weird, like rabbit holes that, may not take you into a good place.
Yeah, radicalizing people in different directions. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into our favorite chapters, the purpose of power, right here with Alicia Garza on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Right here on The Frequency with Alicia Garza, and we are talking about her book, The Purpose of Power. Alicia, please join me. How we come together when we fall apart, which I thought was, wow, interesting. I want to get into that, but I want to share something with you because the reason I was asking you about organizing too was also I had an experience with Diane Watson, Senator Diane Watson, when the whole Los Angeles riots happened. Mm-hmm. And this is when I was still doing the hip hop show, Pump It Up. We went into the community and we watched her work. And it was amazing because, you know, everything got burned down and they needed stuff like simple things like diapers, baby formula. And she had all these, you know, organizations that were coming in and donating stuff. And then she was organizing it and having people, you know, get it out to the community. And it was amazing to see. She was the front face, like you were talking about, but then she had all these people behind her that were doing it. And as I was, you know, speaking to her, just like I'm speaking to you, I was in awe because it was like, how does she do it? How is it being done? And I feel like your book, definitely for me, got to keep showing it because I love it. I'm going to give it out to a couple of people as gifts because like, it's a textbook on how to get it started. And when you say how we come together when we fall apart, it made me think about that moment in the Los Angeles riots where everything fell apart and then now we have to rebuild.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favorite chapters in the book?
Oh, I have so many favorites. And
okay.
You know, it's funny because in writing the book, I don't think I did as much editing as I would have done if I had allowed myself to like think about it, right?
Right.
Stuff that I felt like just needed to be talked about that I felt like could be controversial, but shouldn't be, right? Like these are, again, in the same way that, right, like SNCC had all these debates about, you know, do we register people to vote or do we train people how to do direct action, right?
Right.
I feel like there are a series of debates that we need to have as a generation and figure out where we land in terms of how do we think we win in this moment? How do we think we come together when everything is very clearly disintegrating? One of my favorite chapters in this book is pedestals, profiles, and platforms. And you know, it's a piece of the book where I really talk about how for the first time in my lifetime, you know, activists really got celebritized, right?
Yes.
This is not a thing that I had ever seen. I've been organizing for more than 20 years. You know, the more public and visible way that I'm known, I think, doesn't capture, right, how long I've been in this work.
Right, it doesn't.
I just want to say, like, this has not happened before in my lifetime where, you know, you have activists walking red carpets and, you know, we were fortunate enough to be named as like Time's most influential people of the year. Like, this is not a thing that happens. And, you know, there's all kinds of ways that people approach it. Some people have a real disdain for it and feel like it's opportunistic or it's somehow shady. You know, other people come into this work because that's what they want.
Right.
So we're kind of in that era now. And, I really make this argument that it's not that it's inherently good or bad. It's that you have to have clear strategy on what you're using it for. If you're using it just to boost your own personal profile, right? That's not actually moving us forward as a community. But if you're using those that level of exposure to also expose people to the issues and concerns and demands of your community, then that's a whole other conversation, altogether. I also kind of talk a little bit about the gender disparities, right? Of like who gets highlighted and who doesn't and why. And I talked a lot about, how, often it's men, right?
Exactly.
Gender, heterosexual men that get placed at the forefront. I remember seeing this cover, I think of like Vanity Fair, that made me want to like pluck my eyeballs out, right? Not because I don't love me some Tracy, because I love her.
Right.
Tracy. But because it was like, they were doing this like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X themed thing with like the woman in the background, but that's like not what was happening.
Right.
And actually what has been so powerful, I think, about this last decade is that we've really seen the increase of public visible leadership from women, from queer people, from trans people, right? And I think that is deeply important. And yet we had these kind of mainstream narratives, right, that we're still holding on to about the powerful man and the strong woman behind him. And so, we talk about that in that chapter. Another chapter that I'm really, that's relative to that is this chapter on imposter syndrome.
Oh man, you're hitting the truth bomb, because I've been feeling that lately. I have been in it.
Yeah, it's my love letter to us, honestly. And I talk about, right, how it's not so much that there may be some piece of imposter syndrome for Black women and women of color where we feel like we don't have the appropriate skills or we're just not good enough, right? But also patriarchy is a real thing. And, living in a world where men get to be mediocre.
Okay. I'm talking the bare minimum. Just nothing.
Literally.
Just throw on a t-shirt, don't brush their teeth.
No, and the audacity of it all, right? The audacity of it all. And but we live in a world where we have to navigate, when we say something, people look at us funny, but when a man says the same thing less skillfully than we did, right?
Right.
And everybody flocks towards what they said, even though it was your idea.
Exactly.
And so I want to highlight that because I think there are still.
And when we say it as women, when we say it as women, we get picked apart.
Totally. And that's on so many levels, right?
Right.
Whether it's, telling our stories, right, of how we've been done wrong, whether it's giving our ideas for how it is that we move forward.
Right.
Our ideas are considered to be less valid than that of people who occupy positions of power in our society. And we still have to talk about it. And so I really wanted to put that chapter in there because I wanted people to understand that just because we're fighting for a world where there's justice and freedom and liberation doesn't mean that we're not still intentionally or unintentionally perpetuating the same dynamics that we're trying to intervene on.
Right.
So I put it in there so that we could really think about, like, in our organizations and the work that we do and the efforts that we put forth, are we still doing the same stuff? Or are we being conscious about not just representation, right? But representation with substance, okay? I don't just want more women in decision-making roles, but I want more women who have the same values that I do in roles.
That's what made me feel like your chapter on the power of identity politics. That was one of the ones that I was thinking about, because just that word, identity, can you break it down for the audience so they...
Well, yeah, that word comes from us. I mean, identity politics is actually a movement phrase that comes first through the Combahee River Collective and people like Barbara Smith, right? Who talked about how they cannot separate their politics, right, from who they are in the world,
right,
then it gets co-opted, right? It gets co-opted by conservatives in this country who use it as a pejorative term. Identity politics goes from how you reconcile, right? Being of color, being woman, your sexuality, right? In a world that doesn't want you to survive because of that, to, woke whining, right?
No, you did not. Wait, you done said the buzzword. No, you didn't.
I did.
The woke.
And then
what do you think about that? Like how they're taking the word? And
I think it's complicated because honestly, what happens is we start to adopt the same stuff. So then you start hearing Black people be like, I'm not into that identity politics stuff. What is you talking about? You don't have a choice.
Exactly.
If you are aware of the fact that you are Black in this country, you do not get to abhor identity politics. And just because some white man in a suit told you it was wrong doesn't mean you have to adopt that. That comes from our foremothers. You understand me? That was the way for us to wrap ourselves in bubble wrap, right? Say, we got to outlast this idea that we have to leave parts of ourselves behind in order to pursue justice and freedom. And so I put that in the book because I needed people to understand some of these really tricky methods that conservatives in particular use to create and stow division and confusion amongst our own ranks. You have us talking about us against us, right? But we don't understand the origins of where those things come from. And we don't understand always the impacts, right, of adopting those narratives. We don't need to be microphones for, my mom used to say, for example, the devil don't need no help. Okay. So people say, I'm just being a devil's advocate. She would be like, the devil don't need no help. They're doing fine on their own. Conservatives don't need help in terms of getting their message out. We shouldn't, keep kicking around their language, trying to draw people's attention to it, because all it's doing is embedding it. Right. What we do have to do, though, is organize our people, make sure our people are equipped with the information that we need to be critical thinkers, right? And to see through the nonsense and also to see what's on the other side. That's why I wrote
That's what I want to get into next. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk to Alicia about how do we get to the other side and acquiring that power right here on the Frequency on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind $100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Back right here in the Frequency with Alicia Garza. We're talking about her book, The Purpose of Power. Alicia, please join me because I want to talk about what you were saying, how we get to the other side and, power. Like, how do we get the power? I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, but how do we get power?
Well, we got to organize, we got to pass laws, and we got to put people in positions that can help us have
power. That's basically it.
That's basically it. And I think that's important because I think a lot of people haven't fully thought about how power works and also how we get it. Right. And so I hear people all the time being like, we should just boycott or we should just not participate. And I'm like, okay, I hear you. But here's the challenge with that. It makes you feel good.
Right.
It definitely makes you feel good. But the machine continues without you, and it makes laws about you, and it makes laws without you. And so if you're abstaining, from moral objection, I get it. I get it. But like, who stops the machine?
Are you thinking about getting into politics, like running for any type of office?
When I was in Oakland, I thought about it. We're a tight-knit community there, and we've got some of the best people to do it coming out of our state.
Right.
I am really excited to support one of my mentors and sheroes, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, for Senate.
Yes.
And she will be the only Black woman in the U.S. Senate if she is elected, and the only Black woman for sure with our values. So big shout out to Congresswoman Lee.
Yes.
And we'll be working, to make sure that her race is successful. And then also my sister, Latifah Simon, who is a warrior and has been a warrior since she was like 16 years old, right? Like people don't know that Latifah, I believe, is the youngest person, one of the youngest people to win a MacArthur Genius Award. I mean, like Latifah has been helping to like run the BART transit system for the last 10 years and killing it, and has brought in more money than any of her predecessors to help improve the system.
I wouldn't have known about her until you tweeted about her.
That's what I'm saying. I'm obsessed with her, and she happens to be my friend. But one of the reasons that I'm obsessed with her is that Latifah does all this stuff, right? And she just moves how she moves. She doesn't do it for the accolades, right? She just moves how she moves, like, putting community ambassadors on BART instead of police officers, right? Like she knows what's up. So she is running for Congresswoman Lee's seat. And so this time next year, we could be putting 2 Black women from California into the United States Congress, which I'm 100% for. And I would just love to work for and behind them. That would make me so happy.
That's how you get involved. You're working as a support system. I see you. I see you as like the help from the foundation. So what is Black? What is it? Black Future Lab. Excuse me. What is that? Is that your organization? Is that something you started?
Yeah. So in 2017, I left Black Lives Matter because I really wanted to start an organization that was focused on building power with elections.
Right.
And, this has been an age-old debate in our movements about whether or not to participate in elections. Obviously, we know that there is a ton of corruption inside of government, and government does not function the way that we want it to. But I am also a deep believer that we cannot leave these folks up to their own devices.
Right.
There's too much at stake, and there's too much online for us to just walk away from it. It's ours just as much as it's theirs,
right?
If not more so, right? And so I built the Black Futures Lab in order to work to make Black communities powerful in politics, so we could be powerful in the rest of our lives. When we think about issues of police violence, when we think about issues of public safety, when we think about issues of affordable housing or jobs or wages, all of these things are decided through policy, not through wishing and hoping that things would be different.
That's right.
And too often, right, Black folks are not only not at the table, but we're not even shaping the agenda of what's being discussed.
Right.
And our work aims to change that. So we do build independent Black political power with a range of strategies that includes collecting recent and relevant data about who we are and what we care about. We have run and conducted the largest survey of Black people in American history with our Black Census Project. And it's open right now for people to participate. So you can take it at blackcensus.org.
Nice.
You don't have to be, political. It's a nonpartisan survey. You don't have to give us your contact information or your name or anything like that to take the survey. We just want to know what you deal with, what you think is important, and what you want to see done about it. And then we take that data and we do something called the Black Agenda. And we'll be doing that for 2024, which is taking that information and turning it into a legislative agenda of policies that we fight for together in cities and states to make a real change in our neighborhoods. We also do door-to-door organizing, and we educate, activate, and motivate Black people to participate. And not because our ancestors died for the right or anything like that, just we can be powerful, right?
Exactly.
It's us that are putting these issues on the map. And it's important for us to participate so that we can maintain and build our power. So that's something that we work on. And then we tell new and different stories about who Black people are and who we can be. We are bombarded every single day by narratives that tell us we're not enough, that we don't do enough, that we don't do the right thing. And the fact of the matter is, more of us do the right thing than the wrong thing or nothing at all. And so we want to put those stories out there, and we do that, you know, in a number of different ways. If you want to learn more about the Black Futures Lab, you can visit us at blackfutureslab.org. And of course, if you want to take the Black Census, take it at blackcensus.org and then pass it to like 5 of your friends.
That's right. That's amazing. I have to ask you, you know, you said that in 2017, you left Black Lives Matter. What was that like? Because you were one of the original founders of the organization. What led you to that decision?
Yeah. Look, I've always been an organizer at heart, and I feel very strongly that there are multiple ways to make change. For me, I don't think it makes sense for all of us to be concentrated in one lane, right? You need many approaches, many perspectives. And for me, I felt like, look, like, it's no shade to any way that anybody else wants to do a thing, but where my heart is and where my passion is making sure that we pass laws that change the lives of Black people. And so, you know, I decided to start something myself that could help contribute, right, to this bigger approach and strategy. With that being said, you know, I'm very grateful to be like the smallest part of something that has literally changed the course of history.
It really has. It really has. And I have to tell you, thank you. Thank you for doing that, you and your sisters, because that has really, I think it has helped a lot of people, Black people, just have an umbrella to come underneath to connect, and not just Black people. I mean, it connected all people. And it was really a movement, a force of change. Do you still feel like it is a movement and a force of change?
I do. I feel like it's been quite beat up. So, you know, but I do think that, you know, people are thinking about race in this country in a whole different way. And we're also thinking differently about what's possible. And so again, I'm grateful to be the smallest part of something that has had such a major impact. And I look forward, you know, years from now of, you know, continuing to correct the record. About the work that has been done and the work that is being done. And as I said, as a student of history, I look at things with a lot of nuance.
Yes.
Right? And I am aware, right, that that this movement has had such a global impact, that it has a bullseye on its on it. And so I don't take that lightly.
Right. Has it been a bullseye on you?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you know, in 2020, right, actually the day that my book came out, I was visited at my home by the FBI. They said that my name was on a hit list with several other elected officials and, you know, other activists. And yeah, the FBI came to my house, give me a duty to warn, which is basically like, They just tell you some
a heads up if you're on your own.
Yeah, but we can't do anything about it, and you should just be really careful type stuff. But interestingly, next month, so the people were caught, and it was actually not just one person; it was like 9 or 10 people that were part of a Aryan Nation cell.
Oh my God!
They had planned to blow up power grids and kill a bunch of people, and they're actually going on trial pretty soon in North Carolina. So. Racial violence and racial terror is still very much a tactic that is used to stop and disband and disrupt. Yeah, absolutely.
How do you feel now about your safety?
I feel okay. I was always taught that, whenever there are threats made upon you, you're not supposed to be secret about it.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to tell people, you're supposed to tell a lot of people because you want to look it out for you and making sure that they know if something is out of the ordinary. And so I feel good, and I certainly feel embraced and protected.
Good, because we want you to be embraced and protected.
I appreciate that.
Of course, sis. And what's in the future for you? What's next?
I'm like coming off of this midterm election. We just got our numbers back about how we did door knocking in North Carolina and California and Georgia and Wisconsin. And I'm really happy to say that through our work at the Black to the Future Action Fund, which is like kind of like our an affiliated organization,
right?
We talked to Black people who may or may not have voted in the last 4 election cycles. Right. Usually folks that get targeted for door knocking are people who, vote all the time.
Right.
Focused on people who are like, I'm not sure if I'm going to vote or not. Right. I vote sometimes, other times. And because of our work, Sister D, we increased voter turnout by 50% amongst people who voted infrequently since 2018. So that's a big deal to me, especially as it relates to Black folk.
Yes.
So I'm going to keep doing that. We're still working on the Black census. We're trying to get to 200,000 responses, and we're about halfway there. Again, we are like shattering records for collecting data on Black people. This literally is the largest survey of Black people in the history of this country.
Right.
And you can be a part of that. So I'm just doing that. And then also have some creative projects on deck that I hope are able to get off the ground and get out long. But we'll tell more when it's kind of on the way.
Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for sharing your time with us. This has been an amazing conversation. I have to tell everyone, please read this book, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart. It is amazing. I'm giving it out to several people. I want my daughters to read it. I think it's important, and I hope that it'll inspire me to take the mantle and do something on that level.
You're already doing
Never be on your level, but close and supporting it.
Already doing it.
So thank you, sister. I really appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and you stay safe. We love you. We love you. We appreciate you.
Thank you. You're the best.
Okay, good.
Big hugs and much love. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear
us white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
All right, another episode of The Frequency with this book right here, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart by Alicia Garza. I want to thank her so much for the truth bombs that she let off today. She really helped us understand the meaning of the movement, Black Lives Matter, and all the things we talked about, discussing politics. And I hope that, everyone out there enjoyed this conversation and that you take something from it where you might go into your own community and start a movement, an organization. Remember, it doesn't start from hashtags, it starts from people. Thank you. I'll catch you next time.